Chapter 332. Ming Siyuan's complexion paled, and he coldly snorted. What kind of status did the young master have? She was involved in the great desolate lake's inheritance. It was absolutely impossible for her to enter Cleansing Temple. But this was a bet that White Fong Fong and Zhao Jiutian had made in front of everyone's eyes. If they were to go back on their word, they feared they would draw the ridicule of the world. Moreover, Cleansing Temple wouldn't easily give up such a good opportunity. How could they resolve this matter? Revered Ming felt a headache coming on. He couldn't help but feel a bit of resentment towards fellow Taoist Baoyu, whom he had never met before. If it weren't for this person, he would never have allowed the young lady to make a bet with Zhao Jiutian. Even if she went back on her word, she would have had a reason to do so. It would have been better than the current situation. Yun Ilan faintly smiled. Revered Ming, there is no need to worry. The great, desolate lake and Cleansing Temple are both influential influences within my South Shine Nation. Perhaps Miss White's trip this time will be a turning point for your two sides to cooperate. From now on, everyone will live in harmony and promote each other's development. Wouldn't that be a wonderful story? Yuan Tiangang secretly scolded a lot of nonsense, and the smile on his face became more and more intense. He had a sincere expression of old yin. You are right, and I give you 32 likes. Ming Siyuan's complexion became even more unsightly. The three of them were all Blue Sea Realm super powerhouses, and their eyesight far surpassed that of ordinary cultivators. When the large ape broke free from its cage, they already knew what the result would be. On the platform, the dozen or so alchemy grandmasters were debating among themselves. In the end, they passed a vote and made a decision. On the Jade Peak, White Fingfing's name disappeared without warning and then appeared in the second row. The one who replaced her was Cleansing Temple's Zhao Jiutian, number 5428. Ha 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 ha. Miss Bai, why don't you follow me to Cleansing Temple as a guest today? When the dust settled, the pale-faced Zhao Jiutian could no longer restrain the excitement in his heart. He threw his head back and laughed arrogantly. His eyes swept across the surroundings, filled with disdain and arrogance. Looking around the entire audience, most of the young elites of the South Shine Nation were gathered here. He, Zhao Jiutian, had climbed to the top in a single move and looked down on all the other geniuses. He naturally had the qualifications to be arrogant. At this moment, he was the center of the world. Countless cameras aimed their high-definition lenses at Zhao Jiutian, broadcasting his current demeanor and bearing throughout the entire South Shine Nation. Countless young female cultivators were watching from the various screens. Their hearts were pounding as they looked at Zhao Jiutian's handsome and carefree face, and their hearts were filled with restlessness. Impossible. My family's young miss has an upper 5th grade flying pill. How could she lose? Shady business. There's definitely a shady deal. We request for another appraisal. The great desolate lake's cultivators roared out one after another, their faces filled with shock and anger. White Fong Fong shouted out, "Shut up!" Her eyebrows furrowed and her young face was icy cold. Her dignified aura was like a boulder, making it hard for others to breathe. A defeat is a defeat. My Bai family hasn't fallen to a point where we can't accept defeat. As for the results of this competition, my great desolate lake has no objections. His words made the faces of the alchemists on the high platform brighten up a lot. Today, nearly all of the South Shine Nation's powerful broadcasting stations and internet platforms had started a live broadcast of the competition. They absolutely would not allow anyone to slander their professionalism and integrity. Black Bei Bei had a heavy expression. "Cousin," White Fong Fong lightly said. "Cousin, I know what to do." Black Bei Bei opened his mouth and finally sighed. He was well aware that White Fingfing's current actions were the most correct. But if she admitted defeat, then she would have to abide by the bet and enter Cleansing Temple for half a year. This was something the great desolate Lake absolutely could not accept. Things were getting troublesome. Zhao Jiutian laughed. Miss White is truly honest and straightforward. I admire you endlessly. White Fingfing's eyes were cold. In 10 days, I will go to Cleansing Temple. Just wait for me. Zhao Jiutian cupped his hands together. Then I will respectfully await your arrival. Shua. Ming Siyuan appeared, his expression solemn. Young master, before I leave, the master and madam asked me to bring you back. There is an important matter they need to discuss with you. He turned and lightly said, As for the bet with Cleansing Temple, it will have to wait for Miss to return before fulfilling it. Zhao Jiutian's complexion changed. He could naturally see that this was a delaying tactic, but facing Ming Siyuan, no matter how unwilling he was, he didn't dare to say anything. However, Cleansing Temple also had a blue sea realm master guarding it. Yuan Tiangang had a calm expression. Revered Ming, since this is a bet between 2 juniors, let them discuss it amongst themselves. With our statuses, why should we interfere? His words contained a cold intent. Ming Siyuan remained expressionless. Since the great, desolate lake's young master has spoken, he naturally won't go back on his word. He is only delaying it for a period of time, so there's no need for revered Yuan to worry about it. Yuan Tiangong's lips curled up. Revered Ming, there is no need for you to say such words to this brother. You and I have cultivated for so long and have seen many things before. Today, this brother will only ask if Miss White is willing to fulfill the bet. If not, then this brother will immediately bring Zhao Jiutin away and order him not to mention this matter again in the future. How about it? Ming Siyuan's complexion paled. What a good way to advance, by retreating. If he tried to stop them, then he would be regarded as the great, desolate lake going back on their word and reneging on the bet. If this were any other time, what did it matter if they reneged on their word? At worst, they would just fight. In any case, it wasn't the first or second day that the great, desolate lake found Cleansing Temple displeasing to the eye. But today, behind the cameras, there were many pairs of excited eyes. Ming Siyuan was well aware that if he didn't handle this well, then tomorrow the entire South Shine Nation would be flooded with negative news about the great, desolate lake. Yuan Tiangang added another blow. If the one who lost today was Zhao Jiutian, then I wouldn't have said a single word and would have allowed Miss White to deal with him as she pleased. Unfortunately, people are different in the end. White Fong Fong suddenly said, Uncle Ming, I'll have to trouble you to tell father and mother that I will be going to Cleansing Temple to cultivate for half a year. If there really is something important, then you can come and see me. Father, mother, you must come. Once I go to Cleansing Temple, I will become a piece of meat on the chopping block. If you don't hurry up, your daughter will be miserable. Big brother Bayu, where are you? Why haven't you appeared to help me at this time? Could it be that you don't like Fong Fong anymore? Cough, cough. Speaking of which, when did you start to like her? I don't even know. The battle between the great, desolate lake and Cleansing Temple had attracted everyone's attention. Even the newly minted champion classmate, Zhao Jiutian, was given a certain amount of cold treatment. So, even though he had already walked to the front of the stage, no one was willing to look at him. Fellow Taoist, I would like to apply for a re-examination of the pill I refined. Helplessly, Qin Yu found a police cultivator who was maintaining order and explained his intentions. That's right. In order to show that the competition was fair, participants were allowed to apply for a re-examination if they thought the disparity in results was too great. However, in the past competitions, there were very few cultivators that applied for a re-examination. The officials that judged the rankings were all skilled alchemists. In addition to the strict appraisal procedures, the chances of an accident occurring were extremely low. The police cultivator in front of him didn't seem to have heard him clearly. He reluctantly looked away and swept his eyes over Qin Yu. He impatiently said, "What did you say?" Qin Yu was helpless. He could only repeat his words. And at this time, the police cultivator seemed to recognize Qin Yu. His complexion changed, and his attitude immediately warmed. He looked around and didn't see any live broadcast, so he let out a long breath of relief. Before, that unlucky official had been reduced to the point where everyone wanted to beat him up just because he had a poor attitude towards this boy. His reputation had been ruined, and his life was over. He didn't want to follow in that person's footsteps. Fellow Taoist Ning Qin, do you need me to re-examine the pill you refined? Qin, you didn't care about the change in attitude. His heart was in turmoil right now, so he nodded and didn't say anything. The police cultivator said, "Please wait a moment. I will immediately make a report." Looking at the police cultivator hurriedly leave, Qin, you wanted to say, "Can't you just make a phone call? Why do you look like you're running away?" Looking at the increasingly tense atmosphere between the great, desolate lake and cleansing temple, Qin Yu bitterly smiled. He really didn't want to be involved in this matter and steal their limelight. But he couldn't wait any longer. The police cultivator left and didn't return. But it was clear that Ning Qin's request had already been passed on. Many eyes on the high platform looked over. Although the South Shine Nation officials had given them the right to re-examine a pill, not everyone could casually exercise this right. Otherwise, if everyone said the same thing, wouldn't they be exhausted to death? However, Qin Yu did have the qualifications to do so. Disregarding everything else, just the troubles he had caused, no one dared to underestimate him. Drawing back 10,000 steps, exalted Yunnan seemed to be interested in him. Just this point alone was enough to change their minds. Cough! Seniors, revered Ming, revered Yuan, please wait a moment. We have received an application and need to re-examine a pill. The official in charge of the appraisal respectfully said. He was cursing Qin Yu to death inwardly. To have him interrupt them at this time was absolutely asking for trouble. Good. No. The first response was from Ming Siyuan, and the second was naturally from Yuan Tiangang. It was normal for the two of them to have diametrically opposite attitudes. One wanted to find an excuse to overlook this matter, and the other wanted to take advantage of the situation and force the great, desolate lake to agree. The managing cultivator immediately fell into a daze. His forehead dripped with a cold sweat. He didn't know how to respond. Ming Siyuan's eyes were icy cold. Revered Yuan, in the end, the matters between you and me are both private matters. But right now, we are in the midst of the South Shine Nation's grand competition. Isn't it a bit too much to delay the time of fellow Taoists because of personal matters? At this moment, the audience in front of the various screens were crazily shouting out in their hearts. We aren't afraid of being delayed. Just continue. Re-examining a pill. Who the hell would want to watch? Yuan Tiangang furrowed his eyebrows. Ming Siyuan's words were reasonable. If he insisted on stopping him, he wouldn't be able to do so. But if he were to miss out on such a good opportunity, then he feared that White Fong Fong might enter Cleansing Temple. His thoughts raced, and his lips curved up in a smile. Revered Ming's words aren't wrong, but I've never liked waiting. Just wait for me, it will be over soon. Who is it that wants to re-examine the pill? A low and deep voice, stimulated by his powerful cultivation, instantly spread through the entire audience. Qin Yu's lips twitched. He braced himself and stepped forwards. Greetings, revered Yuan. It is this junior. In front of the Blue Sea realm, no amount of respect was excessive, unless you wanted to seek death for no reason. Yuan Tiangang frowned for a moment before composing himself. Ning Qin, I know who you are. I only have a few words for you. If you cancel the re-examination request, then you can join Cleansing Temple, and I will give you a good position. He changed the topic and swept his cold eyes around. Of course, if there are others who also want to apply for a re-examination, then don't blame me for being impolite. Ming Siyuan cursed inwardly at how cunning he was. But before he could speak, Yuan Tiangang sealed up the last loophole. Revered Ming, it isn't that I want to bully you, but the affairs of the world are difficult, and one must be cautious. Of course. I believe that revered Ming wouldn't send a cultivator from the great desolate lake to apply for a re-examination to deliberately embarrass me, right? Chapter 333. Yuan Tiangang had a calm expression, a faint smile on his lips. Ming Siuin and the people from the great desolate lake all had a weakness, and that was that they paid too much attention to face. If the one who lost today was Zhao Jiutian, then he wouldn't have agreed to release him no matter what. As for those words he said just now, idiot, since he had already won, it wasn't like he would lose any face if he said a few words. Moreover, he could also stimulate his opponent, so why not? Old Yuan held his hands behind his back. He felt as if everything was under his control, as long as he could capture White Fong Fong. Then he could find a breakthrough in the deadlock between Cleansing Temple and the great desolate lake. Of course, this breakthrough would give Cleansing Temple the absolute upper hand. There was even a chance that they could push the great desolate lake into a hopeless situation. In Yuan Tiangong's mind, he had thought of at least several hundred ways to deal with the great desolate lake. But before he could think of a better method, a helpless voice sounded out in his ears. I thank revered Yuan for his kindness, but this junior's strength is mediocre. I fear that I will ruin Cleansing Temple's reputation, so there is no need. Ming Siuin was startled. Then he laughed. Good. I appreciate a junior cultivator like you who has a backbone and ideals. You and I are cultivators. This is how we should be. Only when we rely on ourselves to walk down the road can we be truly solid. I believe that in the future, you will surely have extraordinary achievements. His face was full of praise, as if he were looking at a peerless, proud son of heaven that only appeared once in 100 years. His warm eyes were filled with encouragement. Brat, you've done well. Continue like this. Your future will be bright. Yuan Tiangong's complexion darkened. This junior Ningqin actually dared to defy his will. This was simply unimaginable. There was also Ming Siuin. He had just mocked Qin Yu. The cultivators of the great desolate lake cherished their face. Now that he heard these words, it was like he had been slapped in the face and his heart turned even colder. Ningqin, do you know what you are doing, what you are missing out on, and what you will obtain? Ming Siuin lightly said, Revered Yuan, with your cultivation, it is a bit beneath you to openly threaten a junior. Yuan Tiangang had no expression. He disobeyed my will, which is the same as disrespecting me. Even if I punish him, it is only right and proper. This was the advantage of being shameless. He could say anything he wanted without shame. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. Offending a Blue Sea Realm super powerhouse wasn't a wise decision, but he couldn't give up all of his efforts just because he was threatened. Only the strong could control their own destiny. Qin Yu's desire to become stronger became incomparably urgent. He took a deep breath and said slowly, Revered Yuan, I have my reasons. Please forgive me. Yuan Tiangang was so angry that he smiled. Good, very good. An invisible pressure swept out in all directions like a tide. Yun Elan's figure suddenly appeared on the field. He was like a boulder falling into the sea, suppressing everything. Revered Yuan, Ningqin is a participating cultivator. Since he has doubts about his ranking, he has the right to request a re-examination. These words expressed his dissatisfaction. Yuan Tiangang frowned. He couldn't figure out just what Yun Elan was thinking. If the great desolate lake and cleansing temple fought each other, that would be in the best interest of the South Shine Nation. Yet he actually wanted to intervene. There was a hint of vigilance in his heart. Before he figured out the reason, Yuan Tiangang decided to retreat temporarily and hid his breath. Haha, I was too impulsive. I hope Supreme Cloud can forgive me for my impropriety. Venerated Ming, I hope that you and Miss Bai won't run away from reality. We'll talk about the bet later. Humph. Ming Siuin coldly snorted and returned to the side of the people from the great desolate lake. White Fong Fong stubbornly maintained her momentum, but there was a pitiful look in her eyes. This look left Ming Siyuan unable to vent his anger. With a cold expression, he began to think about how to break out of his current predicament without losing face. At this time, the pondering Lord Venerated Ming didn't know that the matter he was worried about would soon be resolved without any effort. Yun Ilan smiled and cupped his hands together. I thank revered Yuan for giving me this little bit of face. He turned and lightly ordered, Men, bring the pill refined by Ning Qin. All of the pills in the competition, besides those used by White Fong Fong and Zhao Jutian, who needed to test their pills, were sealed away. They would only be disposed of after the competition came to an end. Soon, the pill numbered 9527 was brought over. Along with it was the cultivator responsible for appraising it. He was a middle-aged man in blue clothes. His complexion was a bit pale, but he remained calm. Although the audience in front of their screens were a bit dissatisfied that the liveliness between the great, desolate lake and cleansing temple had been interrupted, since it involved Ning Qin, their interest was quickly piqued. They also wanted to know why Ning Qin would risk offending a Blue Sea Realm superpower house and insist on re-examining his pill. Just why? Could it be that he believed he had a chance of becoming the champion? Besides this, they couldn't think of anything else that could cause him to disregard the price like this. Well, they had heard that the pill furnace in Ning Qin's hands was quite unusual, but alchemy couldn't rely on a pill furnace alone. Just looking at his previous results, it was already a stroke of dog-shit luck that allowed him to enter the finals. Moreover, who didn't know that Ning Qin was refining a useless pill like the demon puppet pill? Disregarding the difficulty, even if he barely managed to refine it, how high could the grade be? Re-examining, there was no meaning to it at all. Yun Ilan lightly said, You are the one who appraised the pill refined by Ning Qin. The blue-clothed, middle-aged man hurriedly bowed. Reporting to Exalted Yin, it was me. Tell me your reason. Yes. The blue-clothed, middle-aged man straightened himself and coldly glared at Qinyu. Fellow Taoist Ning Qin, the demon puppet pill you refined was refined with your own blood and the eternal night demon mushroom. He opened the jade box and poured the pill into his hand. Everyone, please take a look. This pill can barely be considered round on the outside, and it is dim without any light at all. Moreover, the medicinal fragrance is faint. At most, it is an ordinary pill. Of course, in order to ensure that the appraisal is fair, we will scrape off a small amount of powder from each pill and analyze the energy contained within. The final result of this demon puppet pill is that it is low 4th grade. Thus, I have ranked it 376. May I ask if fellow Taoist Ning Qin is confused about something that requires a re-examination? On the appraisal platform, an alchemy grandmaster stood up. He nodded and said, This demon puppet pill was re-examined by me, and the results were the same. 376th place is very appropriate. Yun Ilan swept his eyes over Qinyu. Seeing that he was still as calm as before, his thoughts stirred. He said, Then today I ask the various grandmasters to conduct another appraisal. If it were anyone else, the grandmasters wouldn't have bothered with them. Just what sort of characters were they? Every minute they spent was worth several thousand spirit stones. In particular, when Qinyu proposed a re-examination, he had questioned the appraisal committee of the competition. This was a great loss of face for them. But now the grandmasters had no objections. They took out the demon puppet pill, all of them stirring their spirits and bringing out 120% of their skills. They had to carefully appraise it well, appraise it so well that no one could say anything. Brat, you dare to question our professionalism? Let me tell you, you're done for. Beneath the live broadcast cameras, the 10 grandmasters performed a visual feast called professionalism. The entire appraisal process flowed like clouds and water, but it was also extremely rigorous. Even a layman would be convinced after seeing the entire process. The process wasn't long. After a brief summary, The grandmasters put away their tools and elected someone to read the results. Exalted Yin, we have completed the re-examination. Beneath the monocle, a cold light flashed. The grandmaster's voice was calm and steady. Demon puppet pill, ordinary standard pill, ordinary medicinal efficacy, low 4th grade. However, after careful monitoring, we found that the impurities in this demon puppet pill have exceeded the limit, so its strength will definitely be affected. Although it is still considered a 4th grade pill, its rank of 376 is a bit inappropriate. We have unanimously decided that it should be lowered to 408. After applying for a re-examination of the pill, not only were they unable to obtain a better ranking, but they had instead been knocked down. This result was beyond everyone's expectations. The martial stage immediately fell silent. The audience watching from the screens subconsciously dropped their jaws, their faces dull. Yun Ilan frowned. He had personally ordered a re-examination. Even if these grandmasters were dissatisfied, they still wouldn't dare to tamper with the results. His eyes fell on Qinyu and revealed a cold intent. Although he was curious about the choice of the pill furnace, he wouldn't allow a junior to act recklessly in front of him. There had to be an explanation for this matter. Yuan Tiangang lightly said, "I heard that Ning Qin took many opportunities to show off on the internet and attract countless attention. Youngsters these days are truly incredible. In order to attract attention, they are willing to do anything." This was clearly to label Qinyu as someone who courted death. Ming Siyuan frowned inwardly. But in the end, Qinyu had temporarily helped the great desolate lake out of trouble. He thought for a moment and slowly said, "Perhaps that isn't the case." Yuan Tiangang looked over. "Does revered Ming mean that there is something wrong with this pill's appraisal results? Forgive me for my poor eyes, but I really can't see what is so special about this demon puppet pill. How about I make a bet with revered Ming? We will bet on the quality of this demon puppet pill, and revered Ming will decide the stakes. How about it?" Ming Siyuan's lips curved up, his words filled with ridicule. Ming Siyuan's complexion sank. "Humph! I have no intention of questioning the results. Revered Yuan is too sensitive." He pretended as if he hadn't heard anything about the bet. Qin Yu suddenly spoke up, but his words surpassed everyone's expectations. He cupped his hands together and bowed. "Revered Yuan, this junior would like to make a bet with you. If the quality of the demon puppet pill is acceptable, then I ask that you forgive my previous offense. Otherwise, I am willing to accept any punishment that revered Yuan has to bear." Yuan Tiangang was silent for a moment. Then he shook his head and chuckled. "How interesting. A mere nascent soul junior actually has the courage to make a bet with me. Haha, good, I agree. If you lose, then cut off your hands and never refine pills again in the future." This punishment was extremely heavy, but in front of a Blue Sea Realm junior, a nascent soul junior was as fragile as an ant. To dare to make a bet was in itself a great offense, so it was natural for him to be punished. No one would express any sympathy. Qin Yu's pupils shrank. He cupped his hands together and bowed. "Thank you, revered Yuan." He stood up. "Revered Yin, I wonder if this junior can personally prove the effect of this demon puppet pill." Yun Ilan's eyes flashed. "All right." On the stage, the dozen or so grandmasters all had gloomy complexions. Their hearts were filled with anger. Their gazes seemed to tear thousands of bloody holes all over Qin Yu's body. This junior was too rampant. With the combined strength of over a dozen people, the results had already been verified, and yet he still dared to act like this. This was no different from slapping them in the face. This was simply intolerable. "Arrogant junior, you don't know your depths." "Humph! If you try to be brave for a moment, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Give it to him, give it to him. I want to see just what evidence he can bring out. At most, he will just test the pill and summon a puppet. What tricks can he play?" Chapter 334. Qi Yu received the demon puppet pill from the grandmasters with icy cold eyes. This pill was refined by him, so he knew there was no problem with it. Looking down, it was indeed as the grandmasters had said. It was ordinary, and the medicinal efficacy ordinary. But the truth was that this seemingly ordinary demon puppet pill was actually not ordinary at all. 2 days passed. In the darkness of night, Qi Yu took out the little blue lamp and bathed the demon puppet pill in its light, raising its rank. The first night passed normally. On the surface of the demon puppet pill, there were runes that looked like summoning arrays. As time passed, they became increasingly clear. The entire pill was incomparably warm, sparkling with a treasure light. One could tell at a glance that it was extraordinary. But what happened was that after midnight of the second night, the demon puppet pill that was bathed in the deep blue light suddenly darkened. Countless tiny cracks even appeared on its surface. Qi Yu was shocked. He had never encountered such a situation before. In just several breaths of time, the superb quality demon puppet pill had turned into such a pitiful state. He even suspected that as long as he touched it, it would shatter into powder. Tomorrow was the deadline to hand over the pill. Even if he tried to refine it now, there wasn't enough time. Without the little blue lamp to purify it, the demon puppet pill he refined simply had no chance of winning. As Qi Yu frowned, Ninth Province sent out a second thought fluctuation after he signed the contract with Qi Yu. Demon puppet pill mutation needs strength, eternal night, demon mushroom. The meaning wasn't difficult to understand. So, Qi Yu immediately began the second refinement. As expected, the mixture of blood and eternal night demon mushroom that Ninth Province refined was directly absorbed by the demon puppet pill after approaching. The cracks on its surface greatly reduced. Then there was a second, a third, a fourth. Qi Yu exchanged for 7 eternal night demon mushrooms. 3 of them were refined into the demon puppet pill, and the last 4 were completely absorbed by the demon puppet pill after fusing with his blood. And at this time the cracks on the demon puppet pill completely disappeared. But the treasure light and the runes on its surface also faded away. On the surface, this demon puppet pill seemed extremely ordinary, but only Qi Yu could feel the astonishing strength contained within it. It could be said that the quality of this demon puppet pill even surpassed Qi Yu's own expectations. He was a bit worried that if he handed over this pill, it would attract unnecessary trouble. After all, with his cultivation, it was hard to explain just how he had refined such a super pill. With a nervous heart, he handed over the demon puppet pill. He had already prepared himself to welcome the attention of everyone. He had even thought of an excuse to face all sorts of questions. But reality played a joke on him. As soon as the 376th place ranking appeared on the Jade Peak, he nearly choked on his own saliva. Even if there were as many proud elites in the land of divinity and demons as dogs, it was impossible for his demon puppet pill to be pushed to such a miserable position. Obviously, there was a huge deviation in the appraisal results, which led to the current situation. As Qi Yu held the demon puppet pill, he could feel the surging strength within. A trace of enlightenment appeared in his mind. This should be because of a mutation. Thus, only he, the one who refined the demon puppet pill, could feel its strength. In the eyes of others, it was just a low-level, low-grade, 4th-grade pill that barely took shape. Qi Yu's eyes swept over the stage. At the arrogant and sneering grandmasters, a trace of pity appeared in his eyes. They had been completely unjustly targeted. With such a large-scale live broadcast, the masters' reputations would be smashed to smithereens after today. He lifted a hand and bit down on his fingertip. Then he placed a finger on the demon puppet pill and threw it into the air. Countless eyes and cameras quickly turned to aim at the tumbling demon puppet pill in the air. Then a rich black and red fog erupted without warning. In the blink of an eye, it covered the surrounding 1,000 feet of space. A rich smell of blood and a monstrous infernal energy tumbled about. The black and red fog rapidly condensed, forming an incomparably massive array formation in the blink of an eye. Rumble, rumble, between the heavens and earth, endless spiritual strength boiled and roared. It crazily rushed into the array formation. Their speed was fast, and there were so many of them that they were like rivers returning to the sea. The array formation in the air seemed to be activated at this time. It began to shine brightly, erupting with a terrifying aura that rumbled into the nothingness. Space trembled. Tiny cracks appeared. Then, without warning, the shattered space was broken from within. What pierced through was a pitch-black fist, its surface covered with snake-like scales. The fist turned into a palm. It grasped the edges of the shattered space and ruthlessly tore outwards. Then, the cracked space completely disintegrated. A black figure walked out from the shattered space. Its appearance was similar to a human's, but it had no facial features. Its entire body was covered in pitch-black scales. From afar, it looked like a shadow. Between the heavens and earth, the temperature crazily fell. Black icicles began to appear, spinning as they sprinkled towards the earth. As they touched the ground, a massive layer of black ice condensed. In the blink of an eye, everything within sight was frozen solid. A cultivator dazedly reached out a hand and caught a piece of icicle that fell from the sky. In the next moment, an incomparably horrified expression appeared on his face. But at this time, he no longer had the chance to regret his actions. The black ice instantly froze him within. Ah! What the hell is this? Hurry and run. Don't touch that icicle. With panic-stricken screams, the surrounding cultivators rapidly retreated. Luckily, the icicles only covered 1,000 feet. Otherwise, there would have been massive casualties. The unlucky cultivator that was sealed in ice had already been rescued by an official master. The official shattered the layer of ice covering his body. But this peak divine soul powerhouse revealed a shocked expression. As he looked at Chinyu, there was a deep sense of dread in his eyes. With his cultivation, when he broke through the ice, he actually felt a trace of fear that came from the depths of his soul. The black figure that was summoned broke through space and appeared in front of Chinyu. It stepped onto the black ice and knelt down on one knee. There weren't any words, but anyone could clearly feel his strength and his submission. The entire martial field was deathly silent. In the distance, even the tens of millions of cultivators watching through screens were completely stunned. This was the demon puppet pill. Chinyu's heart shook. Although he knew that after the demon puppet pill mutated, it possessed an extremely formidable strength, the result still surpassed his expectations. The demon puppet pill should have summoned a puppet formed from medicinal efficacy and heaven and earth spiritual strength. It could only exist for a short period of time before dissipating. But at this time, he could clearly feel the aura of life that the black figure in front of him emitted. It was alive! The demon puppet pill had actually summoned a powerful, living life form. What kind of joke was this? Chinyu took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling thoughts. He barely managed to maintain his composure and turned around. Revered Cloud, this is the demon puppet pill that Junior refined. Inwardly, he bitterly smiled again and again. At this time, even an idiot could tell that his limelight had been too great, so great that it couldn't be any greater. With things having come this far, he could only hope that the demon puppet pill wouldn't bring him too much trouble. But it was clear that this was only a delusion. The appearance of the heaven-defying demon puppet pill didn't just bring trouble, but also a great life or death danger. And in this danger, Chinyu had obtained an unexpected harvest. Of course, this was a story for another time. At this time, as long as one wasn't blind, they would know that the dozensome grandmasters had all been slapped in the face. This wasn't a light slap, but a flurry of blows. Their faces were black and swollen, so much so that it was impossible to see their original color. After a moment of shock, everyone looked at the grandmasters with pity in their eyes. Was this a lower fourth-grade pill? Too many impurities in the pill? and 376 wasn't suitable, so it should be reduced to 408? If there were a hole in the ground, these grandmasters really wanted to crawl in and never show their heads again. How shameful! Yuan Tiangong's complexion paled. Even he didn't expect this result. He had been hunting geese all year round, but today he had been pecked in the eye by a little house sparrow. It didn't matter if he lost the bet. At worst, he would just attack when there was no one around. What he was thinking about now was the bet between Zhao Jutian and White Feng Feng. Perhaps he had picked up a stone and smashed it on his own foot. Even with Yuan Tiangong's shrewdness, he still couldn't help but curse in his heart. White Feng Feng's eyes widened and her face flushed red. She couldn't suppress her excitement as she whispered, "Turning around in a hopeless situation. Turning around in a hopeless situation. Zhao Jutian, you never thought that someone as beautiful as me would have such luck. Little brother Ningqin, you are too amazing. I love you to death." Black Bei was overjoyed, but a strange expression crossed his face. His cousin was a smart person, but had she really been scared to death just now? How could she not have thought of this? His eyes fell onto Qin Yu's dark and ordinary face. As he thought about the disdain he had shown towards Qin Yu before, beads of sweat began to form on his forehead. "Senior, if it really is you, then please be magnanimous and don't bother with an ignorant junior like me." Ming Siyuan's eyes revealed a deep look that he immediately restrained. He pretended to laugh in a carefree manner. "Good, good. Little friend Ningqin is truly an outstanding young man. When I was young, I was far from being able to compare with you." His eyes fell onto Yuan Tiangang. "Revered Yuan, didn't you just say that the bet between us isn't over? I also think that it's best to clarify things face to face." Blood tumbled in Yuan Tiangong's chest, and he nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. "What a good Ming Siyuan! I always thought you were a modest gentleman, but I never thought that you would be able to play this trick so smoothly." But what he said before was too firm. Even if he wanted to find an excuse, there was no way to do so. In the end, there was still a difference between being thick-skinned and being shameless. Yun Ilan's heart shook. A look of praise appeared in his eyes. This was truly worthy of being a treasure furnace that was passed down from an unknown land. Its effects were truly extraordinary. An ordinary demon puppet pill could actually be refined to such an astonishing effect. As a Blue Sea Realm superpower house, he could clearly feel just how formidable the summoned shadow was. But he didn't discover that this shadow wasn't a simple puppet, but a mystical and special life form. That's right, revered Cloud had already thought of the most perfect explanation for why Qin Yu was able to refine such an astonishing demon puppet pill. In Yun Ilan's opinion, perhaps Qin Yu was hiding some extraordinary ability on his body. But the reason he was able to refine the demon puppet pill was absolutely because of the treasure furnace. There was no doubt about this. Since the treasure furnace could display such an astonishing strength, then Qin Yu, who was recognized by it, was worth it for the South Shine Nation to try and win him over. Chapter 335. On the appraisal platform, the Grandmasters all had dispirited expressions, as if they had lost their souls. Their spiritual worlds had suffered a devastating blow. Over a dozen people had joined forces to appraise it, and yet they hadn't been able to discover how powerful this demon puppet pill was. If this was because of carelessness or arrogance, then this result might have been acceptable. But the truth was that they had taken out their full strength to appraise it. This was something the Grandmasters couldn't accept, and they even began to doubt their own abilities. As Yun Ilan's voice fell, there was an awkward silence. Then the Grandmaster who spoke looked up with difficulty. Behind his monocle, the light in his eyes dimmed. Reporting to Exalted One, we take back our previous words. This demon puppet pill is the true first-place winner of this competition. His eyes turned to Qin Yu. His lips moved, and he bitterly said, "Fellow Taoist Ningqin, it was us old men who had eyes but failed to see. If we have offended you before, I ask that you forgive us." The truth spoke louder than all else. Seeing the grandmasters lower their proud heads with their own eyes, the countless cultivators cheered in satisfaction. But amidst this joy, there was also a bit of sympathy. Thus, in the silence, a bit of complexity appeared on their faces. Qin Yu's thoughts raced. He cupped his hands together and said, "Grandmasters speak too seriously. I just happen to know some special refining methods. Moreover, the strength of this demon puppet pill has also surpassed my expectations." His sincere expression caused the Grandmaster's expressions to soften. After all, this was some sort of long-lost refining method. It was understandable that they couldn't appraise it, but no matter what, this was still Qin Yu giving them a way out of this embarrassing situation. The Grandmasters were grateful, but also incomparably embarrassed. They had originally vowed that they would teach Qin Yu just how high the heavens were and how deep the earth was, but who knew that in the blink of an eye they would need Qin Yu to help them out. In the eyes of the Grandmasters, Qin Yu was magnanimous and gave them a way out of this embarrassing situation. But in truth, Qin Yu was only using this opportunity to explain why the demon puppet pill was so formidable. As these words fell into Yin Ilan's ears, he became even more certain that the source of the demon puppet pill's strength lay in the treasure furnace. Zhao Zhutian's eyes widened, an expression of disbelief and unwillingness on his face. He stared helplessly on as his name was forcefully pushed down to second place. At the highest point of the Jade Peak, a rainbow-colored light sparkled. New words appeared. In Qin Yu, number 9527, first place. Concocting the child mother yin-yang pill had already left Zhao Jiutian with significant injuries. Now that his mind was in turmoil, his vision darkened, and he vomited a mouthful of blood. The South Shine Nation's youth alchemy competition was filled with twists and turns. Finally, with Zhao Jiutian spitting out a mouthful of blood, the curtain fell on the South Shine Nation's youth alchemy competition. Through the live broadcast, the rainbow-colored name that appeared atop the Jade Peak spread to every corner of the South Shine Nation. Ning Qin's name became a hot topic on the internet once more. The number of followers on his Weibo account soared. Countless female cultivators cried and left messages expressing their love for him. As long as he was willing, they could consummate their marriage tonight and give him a child next year. Ha 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 ha. That bastard Zhao Jiutian, he was actually angered to the point of vomiting blood. He really is narrow-minded. I heard that his anger rushed to his heart and several blood vessels in his head exploded. Hee, how pitiful. White Feng Feng placed her hands on her hips, a happy expression on her face. It was hard to see any sympathy from her. Black Bebe rolled his eyes. "Cousin, the fact that Zhao Jiutian is injured like this is the best excuse. Cleansing Temple definitely won't allow him to leave with us." White Feng Feng was stunned. "Are you saying that bastard Zhao Jiutian was pretending?" Black Bebe curled his lips. "That might not be true, but with this sort of injury, there's a high chance it will be exaggerated. Perhaps he will be bedridden tomorrow, struggling on his deathbed." White Feng Feng stomped her feet in anger. She cursed out loud at everyone from Cleansing Temple, calling them shameless bastards. Ming Siyuan coughed. He lightly said, "That's enough. You were lucky this time. If it weren't for little friend Ning Qin's sudden appearance, I want to see just how you would have ended things." Black Bebe stifled a laugh. Revered Ming was also prepared to be shameless just now. But hearing these words, he must have been embarrassed. "Humph." Ming Siyuan coughed. Black Bebe quickly lowered his head, as if he didn't know anything. White Feng Feng clenched her teeth for a long time. If Cleansing Temple dares to act shamelessly, then I won't let them off easy. This matter isn't over yet. You guys were so aggressive before, but now that you've been knocked to the ground, you still want to let this pass. Dream on. Ming Siyuan warned Black Bebe. Then his expression returned to normal. He thought for a moment and said, "Young master, how do you feel about this little friend Ning Qin?" White Fong Fong had a confused expression. "I'm very grateful to him. He helped me avoid being humiliated by cleansing temple." Black Bei nearly fell to the ground. "Cousin, could your reaction be any slower than this? Revered Ming wasn't asking about this sort of thing." "Cough, cough, cousin. Don't you think that Mr. Ning Qin is very familiar?" White Fong Fong had a dazed expression. "I don't know him. Well, that's not right. His figure is quite good. He's well-proportioned and tall." She shyly smiled as she spoke. Black Bei was left speechless. How could she suddenly turn into a love-struck fool? "Cousin, do you think that Mr. Ning Qin might be senior by you?" White Fong Fong sneered. "Are you blind? My family's big brother Bayu is so handsome and elegant. He doesn't resemble Ning Qin at all. So how could they be the same person?" Black Bei spat out a mouthful of blood. "Cousin, oh cousin, don't you know that there are things in this world called appearance-changing masks? Don't you know that there are some cultivation methods in this world that can allow one to change their appearance? Senior Bayu is most likely the reincarnation of a peerless calamity immortal realm powerhouse. It would be easy for him to grasp these little tricks." Ming Siyuan's expression was calm. It was just that his eyebrows were a bit stiff. He felt that it was necessary for him to return to the great desolate lake headquarters and solemnly remind the Bai family's couple that they had to work harder in educating their child. If White Fong Fong weren't the great desolate lake's young master, then with her current performance, she would absolutely be a character that would die in 2 episodes. Black Bei laboriously explained. Then he took out an appearance-changing mask and changed into a living person on the spot. White Fing's eyes brightened. Right. I was also curious. Ning Qin isn't that good-looking. So how could he possibly have such an amazing figure? Now that I think about it, he really is my big brother Bayu's model. That's right, he is my big brother Bayu, my big brother Bayu." White Fong Fong turned and rushed out. Ming Siyuan's face darkened, and he stopped her. "Young master, I have already told you that you absolutely cannot reveal anything about fellow Taoist Bayu. If you recklessly rush over like this, I fear you will draw trouble to yourself." White Fong Fong curled her lips. "But I miss him." "Young master, this is only our guess, so we can't confirm it for the time being. But he has helped the great desolate lake, so it is reasonable for us to thank him afterwards. Please wait patiently." Looking at White Fong Fong reluctantly nodding her head, Ming Siyuan's thoughts stirred. Although the young master was young and didn't understand the dangers of the world, it was clear from her current performance that she had a favorable impression of fellow Taoist Bayu. If she could really move fellow Taoist Bayu and the two of them walk together, that would be a great thing for the great desolate lake. Of course, the premise of all of this was that his guess was correct. Fellow Taoist Bayu was indeed the reincarnation of a deva. Otherwise, while he was thankful, he didn't need to think too much about the matters above. She was the dignified young master of the great desolate lake, the future ruler of the great desolate lake. She was a woman who played an important role in the South Shine Nation. Not just anyone had the qualifications to covet her. As revered Ming's thoughts raced and White Fong Fong pouted in displeasure, Qin Bayu was being summoned by High Exalted Yun Ilan. As one of the South Shine Nation's exalted elders, Yun Ilan's status was transcendent. Even the Nation King had to bow to him. He was an absolute figure that stood above the clouds. Such a one-on-one meeting naturally attracted countless envious gazes. Everyone knew that this meant that Ning Qin had already caught Supreme Cloud's eye. His future was bound to be bright. Ning Qin greets revered Cloud. Qin Yu bowed, his tone respectful. Yun Ilan smiled and waved his hand. "There is no need to be so polite. Sit." Qin Yu expressed his thanks and sat down. His back was straight and his eyes drooped. He perfectly displayed the pride of a young cultivator and the awe that came from the depths of his heart. This performance was in line with his current status. Revered Cloud felt that he had already seen through Qin Yu. His smile became even more relaxed. He asked Qin Yu several questions about his master and what he experienced in his youth. After some idle chatter, he finally entered the main topic. Ning Qin, you should be aware that my South Shy Nation is holding a competition and all pill furnaces are provided by the officials. After the competition ends, they must be returned. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. This junior understands. With a flick of his sleeves, the cracked pill furnace appeared in front of him. I ask Supreme Cloud to take back this pill furnace. Yun Ilan's eyes fell on Qin Yu. He didn't sense any reluctance. Instead, he felt a bit of appreciation towards Qin Yu. He lifted a hand and grasped the pill furnace. But at this time, the pill furnace suddenly erupted with an extremely powerful aura. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a galloping bull that hurtled straight towards Yun Ilan. Frowning, Yun Ilan's grasp turned into a slap. The void shook, and like a pool of water, the pill furnace was sealed within. No matter how it erupted, it couldn't break free. This also counteracted all of the strength it erupted with. The room fell silent. Qin Yu stood up and bowed. Supreme Cloud, Yun Ilan interrupted him. I know that this matter has nothing to do with you. It is this pill furnace that doesn't want to leave. His expression was calm, but there was a trace of excitement in his heart. He thought for a moment and said, Whatever. Since this furnace is fated with you, I'll let you keep it for the time being. He scattered the imprisoning strength and forced the pill furnace back to Qin Yu's side. Ninth Province seemed to know how strong Ming Siyuan was. After expressing his stance, he didn't attack again. Qin Yu hesitated. This, although he didn't know what sort of treasure Ninth Province was, there was no doubt that it was precious and powerful. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it a treasure furnace. To an alchemist, such a treasure was unimaginably precious. Qin Yu naturally thought of taking it for himself, but he was well aware that it was impossible for the South Shy Nation officials to agree to give him Ninth Province. Thus, when Yun Ilan asked for it just now, Qin Yu didn't hesitate to take it out. Yun Ilan waved his hand. It's fine. You will still need to wait here for several more days. Without waiting for Qin Yu to speak, Yun Ilan gave an explanation. I heard that in this great competition, there will be a great number of outstanding youths. The royal family has already sent out a special envoy who will arrive soon. At that time, the special envoy will appear and personally bestow the rewards. For some unknown reason, Qin Yu's heart throbbed. Although it vanished in the blink of an eye, it still left him puzzled. After hesitating for a moment, he cupped his hands together and said, Revered Cloud, this junior still has important matters to attend to. Can I leave first and have the send a cultivator to accept the special envoy's rewards on my behalf? Yun Ilan shook his head. The reason the special envoy came here today was to see a young talent like you. As for other trivial matters, let's put them aside for now. It won't take too long. His attitude was still warm, but Qin Yu's heart chilled. He respectfully bowed and sat down for a moment before standing up and bidding his farewells. Chapter 336. Qin Yu had a calm expression. After he returned to the residence that the South Shy Nation officials had arranged for him, his complexion darkened. As the champion of the competition, his treatment was naturally different from before. This residence was spacious and bright, and the decorations were luxurious and exquisite. But now that he was here, all Qin Yu could feel was a cold chill rising from the depths of his heart. Yun Ilan refusing to let him leave wasn't normal at all. The greatest possibility was because of the heaven-defying demon puppet pill. Thinking of this, Qin Yu looked down at the shadow beneath his feet. His eyes shined. This shadow didn't seem any different to outsiders, but only Qin Yu knew that the strange life form summoned by the super demon puppet pill was currently in his shadow. Turning back to yesterday, after the competition results were announced, Zhao Jutian vomited blood and fainted. Ming Siyuan taunted and ridiculed him, and Yuan Tiangang gloomily led his people away. The competition came to an end. But not many people cared about the shadow that followed behind Qin Yu. After all, no matter how powerful a summoned puppet was, it would naturally dissipate once the time was up. When everyone left and Qin Yu was the only one left, it took a step forward without warning and directly fused into the shadow beneath Qin Yu's feet. Then, it brought Qin Yu a supernatural ability similar to instant movement, shadow step. Qin Yu had already tested it out. As long as he touched a shadow, he could use shadow step and instantly appear in any shadow within 10 miles. Moreover, the most heaven-defying aspect of shadow step was that it could ignore all shackles. As long as it was a shadow, it could be used. Although the maximum distance he could move was only 10 miles, shadow step was still an extremely heaven-defying supernatural ability that could preserve one's life. This caused Qin Yu to feel a little more at ease. If he really encountered danger, then, with the shadow step supernatural ability in hand, he might have a chance of escaping. As for leaving now, although Qin Yu hadn't entered Divine Soul, his soul force was extremely formidable. He could faintly feel that after he left Yun Ilan's dwelling, his aura wasn't quite right. It was only when he entered his dwelling that it vanished. But there was definitely still someone secretly monitoring him. If he used Shadow Step, he would likely face the teleporting Yun Ilan in the next moment. Qin Yu took a deep breath and barely suppressed his tumbling thoughts. He comforted himself that perhaps he was overthinking things and the South Shine Nation officials didn't have any ill intentions. Qin Yu took out 9th Province and had it activate its defenses. Then he sat down cross-legged and swallowed several pills. The next day, someone knocked on the door. Qin Yu expected that someone would come knocking on his door after he won first place, but he never imagined that it would be Cleansing Temple that came first. Yuan Tiangang smiled. He couldn't help but acknowledge that these Blue Sea realm great figures were indeed shrewd and deep. At the very least, what Qin Yu felt right now was a comfortable spring breeze. Ning Qin, it was my true self that misunderstood you. I hope you don't mind. With Yuan Tiangong's status, for him to say these words could be said to be filled with sincerity. Qin Yu cupped his hands together in return. Revered Yuan's words are too heavy. This junior doesn't dare to accept them. Yuan Tiangang smiled. I know that you always have some resentment in your heart. This ancient jade is a small object that I obtained in my early years. I will give it to you. Don't refuse. This ancient jade can't be considered a precious treasure. Just think of it as a congratulatory gift from me for winning first place in the competition. Just accept it. Qin Yu praised him inwardly, disregarding his character. It was already commendable that this Blue Sea Realm super powerhouse of Cleansing Temple was willing to give up face to come here. But he absolutely couldn't accept this ancient jade. To put it bluntly, who knew whether or not this ancient jade had been tampered with? With a Blue Sea Realm cultivation, there were at least 10,000 ways to use this ancient jade to place Qin Yu in a death trap. Revered Yuan, this junior swears that I have no intentions of disrespecting you. I ask that you take back your gift. Yuan Tiangang cursed inwardly at this slippery little bastard. This little bastard was quite vigilant. If he spoke any further, he feared that Qin Yu would become even more suspicious of him. He smiled and said, Ning Qin, the reason I came here today is because I have a matter that I hope you can agree to. Seeing Qin Yu's vigilance, he no longer beat around the bush and went straight to the point. Qin Yu thought to himself, Revered Yuan, please speak. Yuan Tiangang maintained his composure. I hope that you can sell the treasure, furnace, remnant spirit you obtained in this competition to my Cleansing Temple. He had a sincere expression. Although the treasure, furnace, remnant spirit is precious, it isn't easy to use. Moreover, if there is a single mistake, it will cause great damage to the pill furnace that absorbs it. How about you trade it to my Cleansing Temple? I guarantee that I will give you an extremely generous price. As expected, he had come for the treasure, furnace, remnant spirit. The The fleeting flame, furnace wanted it, and cleansing temple also wanted it. It seemed that this thing wasn't ordinary. However, as he thought about how his situation today was all because of this treasure, furnace, remnant spirit, he bitterly smiled. He didn't know whether or not this trip was worth it. Qin Yu was about to decline when there was a knock on the door once more. His thoughts stirred. He cupped his hands together and said, "Revered Yuan, please wait a moment." He stood up and opened the door. As he expected, it was the people from the great, desolate lake. Qin Yu's thoughts raced, and he soon made a decision. Although this was a bit risky, there was a chance that he could break the deadlock. No matter how bad the result was, it was better than being helpless and at the mercy of others. Ming Xiyuan smiled and said, "Little friend Ning Qin, I have come today to thank you." With just a few words, Qin Yu had closed the distance between them. He couldn't help but have a favorable impression of him. Indeed, those that could reach the Blue Sea realm weren't ordinary characters. Junior greets, "Revered Ming." Qin Yu smiled. "You came just in time. Revered Yuan is also here." Ming Xiyuan's eyebrows arched up, a cold intent in his eyes. "Revered Yuan is also here. What a coincidence." Qin Yu stepped to the side. Ming Xiyuan smiled and nodded, walking in. Behind him, White Fong Fong stared straight at Qin Yu, her face flushed red. If it weren't for revered Ming's instructions, she would have already cried out in joy. It was Big Brother Bayu. It was Big Brother Bayu. There was no mistaking the smell. Looking at this girl's expression, Qin Yu knew that she had recognized him. Luckily, he had already experienced her sensitive nose before, so he wasn't too surprised. He only gave her a meaningful look to tell her not to speak carelessly. White Fong Fong nodded imperceptibly. She quickly walked behind revered Ming and gently pulled on his wide sleeves. Ming Xiyuan maintained his composure, but the smile on his face became increasingly bright. "Little friend Ning Qin, I was lucky to see you 2 days ago. Otherwise, my family's young master would have lost. What a pity. Although you helped the young master win the bet, there was actually someone who didn't care about face and pretended to be dead instead of fulfilling his promise." I'm left speechless. Qin Yu secretly praised Ming Xiyuan for being a good person. Just as he was worrying about how to find an opportunity, Ming Xiyuan suddenly spoke up. He hurriedly said, "Is it the bet with fellow Taoist Zhao Jiutian?" Ming Xiyuan was startled. He didn't think that Qin Yu would dare to respond to him. Could it be that this fellow Taoist Baoyu was also dissatisfied with cleansing temple? That would be for the best. Of course it's that junior. Perhaps there was some misunderstanding in the matter of plotting to kill the young master, and I have already agreed to give cleansing temple a chance to investigate. But this bet was signed in full view of everyone. Now that the result is out, I never thought that cleansing temple would want to shirk responsibility. Qin Yu earnestly nodded. If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. This is indeed not the way to do things. The two of them echoed each other and arrived at the entrance. No matter how thick Yuan Tiangong's skin was, his face was still a bit gloomy. In particular, what caused his heart to sink was that even though Ning Qi knew he could hear him, he still dared to echo Ming Xiyuan's words. Could it be that there was some sort of agreement between the two of them? As soon as this thought appeared, he couldn't sit still. Ignoring Ming Xiyuan's mocking eyes, he said, "Little friend Ning Qin, I am willing to pay a Deva soul in exchange for it. I wonder what you think." Ming Xiyuan's complexion changed, revealing a look of shock. Although Qin Yu had already made his decision, he still felt his heart surge with excitement as he heard this. He almost blurted out his agreement. The so-called Deva soul was not a treasure formed by the heavens and earth. Rather, it was a transcendent calamity, immortal realm existence that would have their soul shattered into millions of fragments when they died. Then, through a lucky chance, they would be condensed from soul fragments. One couldn't underestimate it. It was only a mere soul fragment. It had to be known that this was a Deva soul. Any nascent soul cultivator that obtained it could directly break into the divine soul realm after refining it. The value of this item was unimaginably high. It couldn't be purchased with spirit stones. The scene fell silent for a time. Only White Fong Fong had a clueless expression as she stared at Qinyu. Ming Siyuan's cold voice broke the silence. "Revered Yuan, does Cleansing Temple have a Deva soul? It's best if you don't joke about this sort of thing." Yuan Tiangang had no expression. "Revered Ming, since I have spoken, I will not speak without thinking. Ning Qin, as long as you agree, I guarantee that I will deliver the Deva soul to you within 10 days. Ming Siyuan's complexion darkened. If even a specific time limit was given, could there really be such a precious treasure hidden within Cleansing Temple? Qin Yu sighed inwardly. If Yuan Tiangang could take out the Deva soul at this time, then perhaps he really would agree. After all, exchanging a treasure furnace remnant spirit that he didn't know how to use in order to rise his cultivation by an entire boundary was a great temptation to the current Qin Yu. But 10 days later, the South Shine Nation royal family envoy had already arrived. There simply wasn't enough time. Although Qin Yu felt regret in his heart, his expression didn't change at all. He lightly said, "The price that Revered Yuan is willing to pay is indeed moving. But this junior really doesn't trust Cleansing Temple, so I can only decline your good intentions." At this time, even White Fong Fong, who had been staring at Qin Yu, was shocked by these words. What was this? This was a public face slap. Moreover, the one being slapped was Yuan Tiangang, the face of a Blue Sea Realm superpower house. Pa! Pa! White Fing Fing's eyes shined. She held her hands against her chest as if she couldn't breathe. "Big Brother Baoyu, you are too amazing, too mighty, too domineering. I worship you so much." Yuan Tiangong's complexion paled. His eyes were as cold as a bone-chilling wind. "Ning Qin, are you trying to offend me?" Blue Sea's rage shocked the world. At this time, the space within the room nearly froze over. Every time Qin Yu gasped for breath, he felt as if countless knives were scraping across his windpipe, leaving behind a burning pain. But the more this was so, the calmer he became. His eyes were indifferent as he slowly said, "This junior was too blunt with his words. I ask Revered Yuan to forgive me." Ming Siyuan nearly shouted out loud. What a swift and fierce stab. Blunt with his words, was there a stronger critical strike than this? Yuan Tiangang took a deep breath. All of his raging emotions were restrained like a tide, but his eyes became even colder. "I don't know what promise you obtained that you would dare to be so insolent towards me, but I will soon have you understand that beneath the wrath of a Blue Sea realm, everything will be burned to ashes." In front of Qin Yu, Yuan Tiangong's eyes suddenly became deep and profound, like an endless abyss that could pull out a person's soul and swallow them up, causing them to fall into eternal darkness, never to be able to transcend. Ming Siyuan's complexion changed. Just as he was about to attack, he heard a light cough. Qin Yu's slightly confused eyes instantly restored their clarity. Chapter 337. Endless waves rose up in Ming Siyuan's heart. At this time, there was no longer any doubt in his previous guesses. It had to be known that Yuan Tiangong's soul-killing methods were something that even he had to carefully deal with. But Ning Qin, with his mere nascent soul cultivation, was able to break free in the blink of an eye, and even cause a backlash, the reincarnation of a Deva. He was absolutely the reincarnation of a Deva. Otherwise, how could he possibly possess such a powerful soul? At this moment, Revered Ming's heart burned with a fiery heat. If the reincarnation of a Calamity Immortal Realm Supreme Elder could become a part of the great desolate lake, that would represent an indescribable lucky chance. In the future, the South Shine Nation and even the wider world would become their stage. Ming Siyuan's eyes fell on White Fong Fong, and he revealed an earnest look of anticipation. "Young master, you must work harder and capture fellow Taoist Baoyu as soon as possible. The future of our great desolate lake will depend on you. As Ming Siyuan was lost in his thoughts, Qin Yu's back was already wet with a cold sweat. Just now, for the first time, he truly felt just how terrifying a Blue Sea Realm Supreme Elder was. He felt as if his soul had been grasped by an invisible strength. Without giving him any time to resist, it would forcefully break free from his body and then be crushed to pieces. Luckily, Qin Yu had a partner soul. At the critical moment, he managed to block it and win a breath of time for the little blue lamp to respond. Then, within his Dantian Sea, a brilliant light erupted. It was like a star that suddenly lit up in the dark skies. That deep blue light seemed to cross through endless space and time, shining into Qin Yu's soul space. Then, the invisible strength that descended upon his soul melted away like snow under the scorching sun. But at this moment, Qin Yu felt his vision fall into darkness. He was isolated from the outside world, as if he had fallen into the coldest place in the world. That cold intent ignored his powerful mortal body and cultivation, directly piercing through all obstacles and descending upon his soul, as if it wanted to see through him. That's right, he clearly saw it. This was because Qin Yu could clearly feel that cold and indifferent gaze, as well as the undisguised annihilation and annihilation within that cold and indifferent gaze. All of this had come too suddenly and disappeared without warning. His field of vision was restored as if nothing had happened. But Qin Yu knew that it had really happened. And the reason for all of this was because the little blue lamp had erupted with light just now. To be able to give him such a terrifying feeling, like an ant facing a blue sea without the least bit of room to resist, and also targeted at the little blue lamp, this was the will of the world. Only the will of the world could accomplish this. A single gaze was enough to make him feel as if he was in a desperate situation. Qin Yu's heart was still shaking. He finally understood why the little blue lamp had fallen silent after entering the land of divinity and demons. The aura of the will of heaven and earth was much stronger than when it was in the desolate, barren land. It was simply incomparable. Although the gaze of the worlds had already faded away, Qin Yu knew that a sharp saber hung above his head, ready to cut down soon. With his current cultivation, it was impossible for him to survive the attack from the long saber. Qin Yu felt the gaze of the world's will. That annihilating aura caused him to freeze in place. Because his body was stiff to begin with, no one noticed anything strange. At this moment, because his face was stiff and expressionless, in the eyes of Yuan Tiangang, it was a performance of coldness and self-confidence. It was obvious that if Ning Qin didn't have absolute confidence in himself, how could he possibly maintain his current state? Moreover, what caused Yuan Tiangong's heart to tremble the most was that he had faintly felt an aura from Ning Qin's body that made his heart race. That aura seemed to belong to this part of the world. Blue Sea Realm Supreme Elders had an incomparably sharp sensing ability. Because of this, they could magnify any danger to infinity. Yuan Tiangong's eyes revealed shock and a deep dread. At the same time, there was also a burning heat that he couldn't suppress. The strength that Qin Yu displayed at this time had aroused his interest. If he could control Qin Yu and carefully investigate his secrets, there might be some unexpected harvests. As for whether or not he could suppress Qin Yu, Yuan Tiangang didn't doubt this at all. In the end, he was a Blue Sea Realm superpower house. Even if Qin Yu was a bit mysterious, how could he possibly resist his strength? His eyes erupted with brilliance. Yuan Tiangang lifted his hand and grasped out. There was a loud, rumbling sound in the void, as if an invisible wall had locked down every inch of his body. There was nowhere to run. This imprisoning strength was inconceivably formidable. Qin Yu was expressionless, but alarm bells were ringing in his heart. If that person didn't take action soon, he would be miserable. And this take action wasn't referring to Ming Siyuan. With a cold snort, a figure suddenly appeared. He lifted a hand and pointed at the void. It was like a mountain that supported the heavens toppling over and falling into a great lake, immediately stirring up great waves that shattered the imprisoning strength. Qin Yu drew back again and again. His face paled and his eyes dimmed. This finger had shattered the suppressive force around him, but it hadn't done much to protect him. Thus, even though the shock waves from their collision had caused his blood to tumble and he had suffered some injuries, this was Yun Ilan's warning to him that he had done something to him. As he thought, to these old and experienced existences, his methods were still immature. They could see through his intentions in the blink of an eye. Qin Yu bitterly smiled inwardly, but he didn't regret his actions at all. He respectfully bowed. "Thank you, revered Yin, for helping me." Yun Ilan glanced over at Yuan Tiangang. He lightly said, "Revered Yuan, Ning Qin is the champion of this competition. Don't you think your actions have gone too far?" These words were heavy. In particular, coming from Yun Ilan's mouth, they represented the dissatisfaction of the entire South Shine Nation. And in fact, this was indeed the case. Yun Ilan had already received a secret letter from the capital. That person was extremely interested in Ning Qin, so he naturally couldn't allow anything to happen to him. Objectively speaking, Yuan Tiangong's actions weren't excessive, but they had already touched Yun Ilan's nerves. He absolutely wouldn't allow any unstable factors to appear at this critical moment and affect the subsequent arrangements. Yuan Tiangong's complexion darkened. From these words, he could feel a threat. In all his dealings with Yun Ilan, this was the first time this had occurred. It could be seen that this South Shine Nation exalted was truly enraged. But it was also because of this that the meticulous Lord revered Yuan couldn't help but overthink things. His first thought was that Yun Ilan had discovered the secret hidden on Ning Qin's body and was preparing to take it for himself. Originally, this was only a guess, but with Yun Ilan's appearance, Yuan Tiangong's judgment was confirmed. He took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes. "Revered Yun's words, I don't quite understand. Junior Ning Qin has been disrespectful to me, so can I not punish him? So what if he is the champion of the great competition? Can he compare to the dignity of a Blue Sea Realm Supreme Elder like you?" This reaction didn't seem like Yuan Tiangong's usual smooth and slick way of dealing with matters. He simply didn't leave any room for negotiation and directly confronted Yun Ilan. The simple meaning was, although the South Shine Nation is called the South Shine Nation, my cleansing temple doesn't necessarily fear you. A gloomy expression appeared on Yun Ilan's face. He originally didn't think too much about this, but Yuan Tiangong's unexpected response left him thinking about it. Was Cleansing Temple preparing to snatch away the pill furnace that the South Shine Nation still hadn't fully understood? As soon as he thought of this, Yun Ilan's aura instantly rose. Cleansing Temple had good eyesight, but weren't they afraid that their teeth would fall out? A chill tumbled in his heart, but Yun Ilan remained calm on the surface. He slowly said, "How does revered Yuan plan to deal with Ning Qin?" Yuan Tiangang lightly said, "I will take him away. Life or death is not a concern." Yun Ilan shook his head. "No." With these two simple words, the entire space fell deathly silent. Time seemed to stretch out without end. Every breath of time seemed incomparably long. Space twisted and tiny distortions appeared in the air. Everything seemed calm, but beneath this calm surface was a great volcano waiting to erupt. Once it erupted, it would be enough to completely destroy everything in front of it. Ming Siyuan grabbed the still unaware White Feng Feng and pulled her behind him. His complexion darkened as he looked at the scene in front of him, his thoughts rapidly racing. Yuan Tiangang and Yun Ilan were confronting each other, their focus focused on Qin Yu. When this scene fell into the eyes of revered Ming, who thought he already knew all the secrets, he had a completely different interpretation. Yuan Tiangang and Yun Ilan had sensed the secret of Deva reincarnation on Qin Yu's body. This was the only way to explain why these two Blue Sea Realm Supreme Elders would tear apart all pretense of cordiality and confront each other head-on. The soul of a Deva to any Blue Sea Realm. This was a great temptation. This was because it contained a chance to break into the Calamity Immortal Realm. For some unknown reason, the high-level cultivators of the Great Desolate Lake were well aware that the chances of obtaining the soul of a deva were unimaginably low. Perhaps the Great Desolate Lake would have already begun to move. Returning to the main topic, with the judgment of his superiors, Ming Siyuan felt that he needed to make a decision. There was no longer any doubt that Ning Qin or Baoyu was the reincarnation of a deva. If he could sell them a favor today, then even if the miss and him didn't end up together in the end, the Great Desolate Lake could still form good karma with this transcendent existence that would surely become a calamity immortal in the future. With his thoughts set, Ming Siyuan exerted strength in his hand. Before White Feng Feng could resist, she was sent flying away. He stepped forwards like a mountain, falling into the invisible confrontation between Yuan Tiangang and Yun Ilan. The complexions of the two Blue Sea Realm super powerhouses changed. They coldly glared at him. Ming Siyuan lightly said, "My Great Desolate Lake has always distinguished gratitude and grudges clearly. Little friend Ning Qin has helped the young master, so he is a friend of my Great Desolate Lake. The reason I came here today is to invite him to the Great Desolate Lake as a guest." Disregarding whether or not this was a valid reason, at least his attitude was clear. Thus, Yuan Tiangong's pupil shrank and Yun Ilan's heart was filled with anger. One of them was more and more determined to obtain Qinyu, and the other was angry that Cleansing Temple and the Great Desolate Lake had actually shown hostility towards the South Shan Nation at the same time. Qinyu originally only hoped to enrage Yuan Tiangang so that he would take action and disrupt the situation, seeking a few variables. But, as the initiator of all this, he never expected that the situation would develop to this step. The air seemed to freeze over, and there was no longer any sound between the heavens and earth. The auras of the three Blue Sea Realm Masters were like invisible hands that thrust into the heavens, stirring up the winds and clouds. Thus thunder roared. Thus strong winds raged. The horizon turned pitch black, as if eternal night had arrived. Chapter 338. A peak nascent soul had the strength of 1,000 horses. 1,000 horses were equal to a flood dragon. The strongest divine soul had the strength of 1,000 flood dragons. 1,000 flood dragons were equal to a single dragon. As for the higher boundary, the Blue Sea Realm, they could at most possess the strength of 1,000 dragons. This was an ancient. Yun Ilan, Ming Siyuan, and Yuan Tiangang were all far from having the strength of an ancient. But as veteran Blue Sea Realm super powerhouses, the three of them had a combat strength of around 300 dragons. From this data, one could clearly understand just what the Blue Sea Realm was. Thus, even though Yun, Ming, and Yuan's three Blue Seas hadn't truly fought, just the collision of their auras was enough to cause a world phenomenon. The cultivators participating in the competition were all of the South Shan Nation's younger generation. Most of them only had a golden core or nascent soul cultivation. Within the range of this aura, they were as fragile as ants. It was already amazing that they hadn't fainted from fright. As for the few South Shan Nation officials, even if they had peak divine soul cultivations, they could only tremble beneath the might of a blue sea, not daring to approach at all. In this wilderness, the area that had been cleared fell into a deathly silence. Besides the sound of wind and thunder, there was no other sound. Everyone fell into a deep fear. They didn't know whether or not their fates would come to an abrupt end in the next moment. At this time, a wisp of light suddenly appeared. It tore apart the eternal night in the skies and sprinkled warmth onto the earth once more. That heavy pressure that left one unable to breathe began to rapidly recede like a tide. At this moment, countless cultivators felt as if they had been reborn. They gasped for breath, their expressions filled with excitement. They looked up and stared at the figure that appeared in the skies. There was no need to remind them. Everyone knew that it was this figure that had saved them from the brink of collapse and death. Unfortunately, there seemed to be a far too formidable strength surging around this figure. Space was distorted and blurry, making it impossible for anyone to see who it was. Qin Yu never realized that breathing was such a blissful matter. His eyes fell on that blurry figure with gratitude. But in the next moment, this gratitude came to an abrupt halt. Yunlin took a step back. He restrained his aura and bowed. Greetings, old ancestor. He was an exalted of the South Shine Nation and had a lofty status. For Yunlin to bow to him like this, it was naturally only the most exalted person in the South Shine Nation. Old ancestor. South Shine Nation's old ancestor. Yunlin had once mentioned the royal family's special envoy, and today the South Shine Nation's old ancestor had arrived. If you said that there was no connection between the two, who are you trying to fool? Qin Yu discovered that he seemed to have underestimated the attention placed on him by the South Shine Nation officials. To others, this might be the result they yearned for even in their dreams. But Qin Yu had the little blue lamp. Once he was discovered, he would die without a doubt. At this moment, in his anxious and restless mind, he suddenly remembered a lyric that he had inadvertently heard from a certain TV series. If time could be rewound, only a bastard would participate in this competition. Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangong's pupils shrank. They bowed at the same time. We greet ancestor, Huluin. In the South Shine Kingdom, Huluin was the surname of the country. Within the entire competition arena, countless cultivators could hear the voices of the 3 Blue Sea Realm super powerhouses. After a brief period of silence, the sounds of kowtowing filled the air like a tsunami. Greetings, old ancestor. The sound waves surged into the sky. Just this point alone was enough to highlight the South Shine Nation's old ancestors' unsurpassed status and dignity. Beneath the skies, a blurry figure spoke up. You may rise. His voice was gentle, like a clear spring that poured into the depths of one's heart. It shook one's spirits and caused them to feel even more awe. When they looked up once more, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor had already vanished from sight. For better or worse, the 3 of you are blue sea cultivators, and yet you can't maintain your composure. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by the juniors? The South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled, as if he hadn't been angered by what happened just now. Qin, you could clearly see that the old ancestor had taken a step in the skies and then appeared in front of him. Although it was incomparably sudden, it gave off an extremely natural feeling, as if he should have been standing here to begin with. As if sensing Qin Yu's gaze, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor turned his head. As he met those eyes that seemed to see through everything, Qin Yu's heart shrank and he quickly lowered his head. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor revealed a smile. He looked at Qin Yu several more times before looking away. It was clear he was a bit interested in Qin Yu. Yunlin bowed. Old ancestor, it was I who didn't handle the situation properly. I asked the old ancestor to punish me. Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangong revealed a bit of unnatural expression. They both opened their mouths to ask for forgiveness. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled and waved his hand. Although I just arrived, I can roughly guess what the reason is. It should be because of this little friend. Yunlin nodded. He is Ning Qin. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled. He is truly an outstanding young man. Not bad. His eyes fell onto Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangong. I believe that this competition was absolutely wonderful and many amazing juniors have emerged. If they aren't properly trained, then it would be too much of a pity. So I sent a message to Exalted Yin to have him retain these juniors for a few days so that I can personally take a look at them before making a decision. After a pause, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled. I have decided to restart the refinement of the revival good fortune pill. I ask revered Ming and revered Yuan to pass on this message. Although his words were polite, they weren't a discussion but a one-sided announcement. From this, one could see just how strong the South Shine Nation's old ancestor was. Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangong's complexions changed. Revival Good Fortune Pill. This was one of the South Shan Nation's greatest secrets. In the last several thousand years, it had only been opened a few times. Most of the cultivators that participated in this event were able to obtain amazing good fortune. Although this revival good fortune pill was a bit strange, up until now, nothing seemed out of place. Those cultivators that obtained good fortune, unless they perished midway, all of them obtained considerable achievements. For instance, this exalted Yunalan was someone that obtained a heaven-defying lucky chance from the revival good fortune pill 1,700 years ago. Thus, he was able to become a Blue Sea Supreme Elder today. Ming Siyuan cupped his hands together. Old Ancestor Huluin, I must first report to my two masters before replying. Yuan Tiangong nodded. I also need to report to the Hall Master. Old Ancestor Huluin had already appeared. There was no need to discuss matters concerning Qinyu any further. Moreover, it seemed that they had been wrong about this matter. The South Shan Nation's old ancestor smiled. It's fine. I will give you 2 days to consider. 3 days from now, the top 10 of the great competition will all obtain an invitation to refine the revival good fortune pill. He turned, his eyes warm. Ning Qin, I am quite optimistic about you. Don't disappoint me. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. Just as he was about to say something, a look of fear suddenly gushed out from the depths of his eyes. After a tenth of a breath, he stood up and walked over to the South Shan Nation's old ancestor's side. He bowed and said, This junior will do his best. I will not disappoint the old ancestor. The South Shan Nation's old ancestor was startled. He immediately smiled and nodded. At this time, he only felt that this junior was quite bold. He never imagined that he would inexplicably fall into his trap. It's here. At this moment, the blood drained from Qin Yu's face. His soul shivered and screamed. The skies darkened without warning. This sort of darkness didn't seem like the world phenomenon caused by the battle between the 3 Blue Sea Supreme Elders. Rather, it was like some existence had opened its mouth and taken a bite, eating away at this complete space into nothingness. That's right, it was that kind of emptiness, a feeling of nothingness without anything at all. Just looking at it caused a chill to rise from the depths of one's heart. The South Shan Nation's old ancestor's complexion changed. He fiercely looked up, his eyes locking onto that darkness, and his complexion paled. No one knew just how angry the old ancestor was at this time. He never imagined that the annihilation tribulation he sensed would suddenly arrive, and he hadn't sensed any of this beforehand. Has the world already made up its mind to erase this old man from existence? The South Shan Nation's old ancestor's eyes surged with madness. Within his decisiveness was unwillingness and anger. If they wanted to kill him, it wouldn't be so easy. That's right. The pitch-black darkness that suddenly appeared in the skies had been taken over by the South Shan Nation's old ancestor. It could only be said that this was an incomparably beautiful misunderstanding. From the start, the old ancestor never imagined that the pitch-black darkness in the skies was coming for this junior that was respectfully bowing in front of him. Without warning, a black light shot out from that pitch-black nothingness. This action seemed to exhaust all the strength of the nothingness. Thus, when the black light arrived, the nothingness trembled and collapsed, vanishing from sight. The South Shan Nation's old ancestor shouted out loud. An incomparably terrifying aura erupted from him, like 100,000 volcanoes erupting at once. It was hard to imagine just how his thin and weak body could contain such an astonishing strength. Qin Yu tensed up. He felt as if a building was toppling over. Fear gripped his heart like a giant hand. Without a doubt, if he were to be struck by this aura, he would instantly turn into a pile of broken bones and minced meat. Life or death hung on the line. The South Shan Nation's old ancestor frowned. He erupted with his aura, wrapping around Chinyu. This junior might still be useful, of course, if he couldn't cross today's great calamity. This junior would die an even more miserable death. It was unknown what the black light was. It passed through space without leaving behind a single trace, as if it were nothing more than a phantom. But the South Shine Nation's old ancestors' complexion became increasingly dignified. He could clearly feel the destructive strength contained within the black light. Break! With a thunderous roar, the old ancestor punched out his fist. Between the heavens and earth, there was a violent roar. The strength of this fist turned into a fierce black dragon in the blink of an eye, colliding with the black light. The South Shine Nation's old ancestors' fingers began to form law seals within his sleeves. Once the situation turned bad, even if he was discovered, he would still go all out. But in the next moment, he furrowed his eyebrows. This was because, in the moment they collided, he could feel the illusory nature of the black light. Its strength was far too weak. With this thing, it might be able to injure him, but wanting to erase him from existence was impossible. Pah! The black light disintegrated, turning into countless tiny particles of powder. The South Shine Nation's old ancestors' complexion changed. This was because he discovered that the powder didn't disappear. Rather, after passing through the might of his fist, it continued to roll towards him like black snow. It really wasn't as simple as it seemed. The old ancestor coldly sneered. In his long life, he had seen countless schemes and plots. So how could a mere trick like this be able to deceive him? But soon, the old ancestor's sneer turned to one of surprise. This was because he discovered that the target of this black snow wasn't him, but Ning Qin. Chapter 339. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor's heart shook. He thought of the possibility that he was being used. But this thought only flashed for a moment before it was erased from his mind. Today, the world's erasure was indeed weaker than he imagined. But to kill an ordinary Blue Sea realm was as easy as turning his hand. A mere nascent soul realm junior, an ant-like existence, didn't have the qualifications to do so. So why would the world's erasure be directed at Chinyu? Like a beam of light, it split apart the fog that swirled in his mind. In that split second, the old ancestor thought of a possibility. His breath caught in his throat. Then it deepened. Raging anger ignited in his chest, igniting within him. The world's erasure couldn't deal with him, but it could destroy his hopes of continuing to live and thus indirectly achieve its goal. That's right, it had to be like this. The old ancestor had already learned everything about Chinyu from Yun Ilan. If it weren't for that mysterious furnace choosing to recognize him as its master, how could he have condescended to come here? Indeed, this junior Ning Qin was the turning point for him to break through his shackles. And now, the world's erasure wanted to kill Ning Qin and destroy his hopes. Despicable. Shameless. Even the world was sinister and treacherous. If you have any methods, then come at me. But if you want to touch my turning point, don't even think about it. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor angrily roared out. He reached out a hand and slapped at the powder that fluttered towards him. His wide sleeves fluttered about. Every single ripple caused space to shatter and countless fine cracks to appear in it. With a furious strike, the old ancestor's cultivation erupted without any violence. As his palm fell, it was like a million mountains were collapsing. At this time, each and every one of these tiny grains of powder seemed as heavy as a mountain. The old ancestor stuffily coughed, and his complexion paled. Not only was this powder incomparably heavy, but it also contained a tyrannical strength that could destroy the soul. Even with his cultivation, he was barely able to withstand it. Was there really a need to do this to kill a mere nascent soul? It seemed that the worlds had expected him to stop it. But if he was careless for even a moment and was struck by even a single grain of powder, Ning Qin would be thoroughly killed. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor couldn't help but rejoice. Luckily, he had reacted quickly. Otherwise, it would have been too late for regret. Humph! Since the old ancestor had already discovered it, then no matter what methods you have, you can forget injuring Ning Qin in the slightest. All of the powder was forcefully destroyed by the South Shine Nation's old ancestor with his tyrannical strength, even if he had to suffer heavy injuries. Cough, cough. Coughing lightly, the old ancestor raised his head to look at where the black void had disappeared, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Damned heavens! You're still not good enough to fight me. The old ancestor lowered his head. His eyes became incomparably gentle, as if he were looking at the most precious treasure in the world. Ning Qin, I will leave first. 3 days from now, I will wait for you in the capital city. He turned, his voice as cold as the midwinter night wind. Yunnan, I admire Ning Qin very much. His safety cannot be compromised. These words were clearly not just directed at Yunnan. Cracks began to appear on the South Shine Nation's old ancestor's body. Then the old ancestor began to disintegrate, turning into countless shimmering powder that vanished from sight in a breath of time. Ancestor's body, or ancestor. Ming of this, the ancestor of Yin. After standing up straight, he said with a solemn expression, Revered Ming, revered Yuan, you already understand what the old ancestor has said. Please make your preparations as soon as possible. Ming Siyuan took a deep breath and slowly said, Revered Ming, revered Yuan, you have already understood what the old ancestor has said. Please prepare as soon as possible. Ming Siyuan took a deep breath and slowly said, I will immediately report back. At the latest, there will be a result by tomorrow. He glanced at Qin Yu, nodded, and left. Yuan Tiangang bid his farewells without expression. The old ancestor's words were clearly a warning to him that he couldn't move against Ning Qin for the time being. Moreover, what happened just now and the cultivation the old ancestor revealed just now had left endless waves in his heart. He had to immediately contact Cleansing Temple. Watching the two leave, a sharp light flashed deep in Yunilan's eyes. The revival good fortune pill was indeed suspected by all sides of the South Shine Nation, but the lucky chance and good fortune it represented couldn't be refused. The great, desolate lake and Cleansing Temple would definitely agree. Of this, revered Cloud was fully confident, but at this time he didn't feel any joy at all. He was aware of the old ancestor's condition. Everything should have been under his control, and he even had time to prepare. So why would a world-killing tribulation descend today without any warning? Had something happened to the old ancestor? Yun Ilan's complexion darkened. After a long time, he took a deep breath and looked at Qin Yu. Ning Qin, I know you are restless in your heart, but I hope that something like today will be the last time. Qin Yu cupped his hands together, but before he could speak he was interrupted. I don't need your promises. I only look at your actions. I hope you won't disappoint me. After sending the preoccupied Yun Ilan away, Qin Yu closed the door. All the pores on his body opened and massive amounts of sweat gushed out, soaking his robes. His hair stuck to his forehead and he looked incomparably distressed. His feet felt soft and he didn't even have the strength to take a step forward. Qin Yu supported himself against the door and slowly sat down. Then he let out a long breath and bitterly smiled. Just now, he really had taken a trip to the gates of hell. If it weren't for the old ancestor, his fate would have been miserable to the extreme. In the skies above, before that pitch-black void appeared, Qin Yu had already received a warning from the little blue lamp. Before his thoughts raced, he instinctively responded and approached the old ancestor. This was because the old ancestor was the strongest person present. Only he might be able to resist the world's killing tribulation. Now that he was still alive and the old ancestor didn't even suspect anything, it could only be said that Qin Yu didn't know what the reason was. But at this time, only a ghost would be in the mood to care about karma and cause. Living was the most important thing. After a long time, Qin Yu felt his sore body gradually recover its strength. He didn't stand up. Instead, he straightened his legs and changed into a relatively comfortable position. Then he leaned against the door, deep in thought. That black beam of light that descended just now was terrifyingly powerful, but through the little blue lamp, Qin Yu could faintly feel that it wasn't a true killing move. Rather, it was more like a probe by the world's will. That's right, it was a probe. Through this attack, it wanted to determine just how strong Qin Yu was and then formulate a true annihilation plan. Thinking of this, even though Qin Yu had a firm will, his complexion darkened and he bitterly smiled inwardly. A single probe was already so terrifying. If a true annihilation were to descend, then perhaps all that was left for Qin Yu was death. No wonder the little blue lamp had been so silent after entering the land of divinity and demons. It was because once it erupted with its true might, it would be locked onto by the world's will. Qin, you didn't have any complaints about this. Not to mention the fact that if the little blue lamp hadn't attacked, Yuan Tiangang would have been enough to make him suffer. The reason he had his current cultivation and was able to step into the land of divinity and demons was all thanks to the little blue lamp. Now, the only thing he needed to consider was how to survive the annihilation-level world-killing tribulation that was about to descend. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. After a long time, he let out a long breath. At this time, perhaps this was the only way. South Shine Nation's old ancestor. That's right, it was this old monster that gave Qin Yu an extremely bad premonition. Even so, he had saved his life. This old monster seemed to be very interested in him. Although he didn't know what this interest was, he didn't need to be a genius to know that it wasn't too wonderful. If this were any other time, Qin Yu would definitely think of a way to escape and hide as far away as possible. But now he decided to do the exact opposite. Not only would he no longer run away, but he would do everything possible to stay by the side of the South Shine Nation's old ancestor until he helped him cross the world-killing tribulation. Just yesterday, Qin Yu had been distressed over how to escape, but today he needed to think of a way to stay. Sure enough, the changes of the world were hard to predict, but in the end, this was all because he was weak. If he had the strength to resist the world-killing tribulation, then he would naturally be able to control his own destiny. My life is my own, not the heavens to do this. It was more than just difficult. Qin Yu took a deep breath. At this time, his heart began to vigorously beat in his chest. His conviction to become stronger became even firmer. He closed his eyes, his thoughts incomparably clear, as if they had been washed by a spring of clear water, becoming purer. He had witnessed the might of the blue sea, had withstood the world-killing tribulation, had experienced all sorts of ups and downs, and his emotions had tumbled in his heart. Unknowingly, Qin Yu's state of mind had taken another step forward. A moment later, he opened his eyes. He felt that the current predicament in front of him was no longer urgent. Instead, what replaced it was a faint self-confidence. He would definitely be able to overcome this difficulty, go further, become stronger. Qin Yu stood up and entered the training room. He took out pills and swallowed them, closing his eyes to refine them. Tiny streams could gather into rivers and seas. Grains of sand could pile up into mountains. There were no shortcuts in cultivation. Only by constantly working hard could one achieve oneself. Otherwise, no matter how many grand ambitions he had, they would all be nothing but empty words. It was unknown how Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangang communicated with the great desolate lake and cleansing temple. On the second day, both sides expressed their willingness to allow their juniors to participate in the refining of the revival good fortune pill. However, in order to ensure their safety, the two of them asked Yunnan to follow them to the capital city. After Yunnan asked for instructions and obtained a response, the matter was settled. As for the special envoy sent by the royal family, he arrived just as the sun was setting in the west. The rewards of the South Shine Nation's official alchemy competition were very generous. At the very least, the harvests obtained by the top 10 cultivators were enough to make even divine soul powerhouses jealous. For instance, Qin Yu. He had placed all of his attention on the treasure furnace remnant spirit. But when he received the rewards from the royal family's special envoy, he he was stunned to discover that the rewards were shockingly great. There was no need to mention the treasure, furnace, remnant spirit. In addition, there were also two incomparably precious treasures, the heavenly origin soul fruit and the sealed dimension ring. The heavenly origin soul fruit was the size of a child's fist. It bloomed for 1,000 years, withered for 1,000 years, and bore fruit for 1,000 years. After hanging for 1,300 years, it would turn a pale gold color and be considered ripe. After a cultivator swallowed this fruit, it could greatly enhance the strength of their soul. Even in the land of divinity and demons, it was incomparably precious. It was a transcendent divine fruit that could only be found through a stroke of fate. The sealed dimension ring was refined by cultivators and was called a spatial key. It was an extremely precious treasure. The land of divinity and demons was vast and boundless. Any one of the 7 great empires had trillions of territories. Generally speaking, it could be considered an incomparably massive space. In this space, there were many overlapping small spatial fragments. For instance, in the land of exiles, the place where the gold noble family lived was a spatial fragment. In the rumors, there were calamity immortals that could comprehend the great Tao of the heavens and earth and control 1,000,000,000,000 rules. They could absorb spatial fragments and refine them into the boundless nothingness. What was nothingness? Perhaps not even calamity immortals knew. But its most powerful attribute was that it was unknown. A spatial fragment that was refined into nothingness was incomparably safe. Its only entrance was the communication tool left behind when it was refined. Chapter 340. Of course, one could simply regard the sealed dimension ring as an enlarged version of a storage ring. But to use it like this, especially for an alchemist, was a great waste. After Qin Yu obtained the sealed dimension ring, under the envious gazes of countless people, he directly recognized it as its master. After a drop of blood was absorbed by it, he could feel the endless distance, a tiny node in the nothingness. That was the spatial fragment that the sealed dimension ring was connected to. After enduring the entire process of handing out rewards, Qin Yu didn't care at all. Because the royal family's special envoy announced that they would restart the refinement of the revival good fortune pill, it set off countless cries of alarm. The other cultivators around him also had excited looks on their faces. After the royal family's special envoy finished saying that he would leave for the capital city tomorrow, he turned and left without hesitation. He hurried back to his residence and closed the courtyard doors. Taking out the sealed dimension ring, Qin Yu didn't hesitate to probe it with his divine sense. In his mind there was a faint, buzzing sound. Then his thoughts became a bit more numb. Perhaps calling it numb wasn't the right word to describe it. It was like he was wrapped up in an invisible strength, making everything around him blurry and slow. Luckily, this feeling only lasted for an extremely short period of time. Then, Qin Yu discovered that his consciousness had appeared in a dim space. His eyes swept the surroundings. What entered his eyes was an extremely desolate world. The ground was shattered and covered in giant cracks that crisscrossed and cut apart everything. It was like an ugly giant spiderweb, as if it had experienced a calamity. In the distance, a mountain peak had shattered. Boulders tumbled down, smashing into the dried-up river at the foot of the mountain, nearly burying it. This spatial fragment was unexpectedly large. Unfortunately, it had clearly suffered irreparable damage. The heaven and earth's spiritual strength in the air was so thin that it was nearly undetectable. If this was all, then such a large spatial fragment could be used purely as a storage magic tool. It would have an inestimable value. But the reality was that at the end of his line of sight, at the edge of this spatial fragment, the sky would occasionally twist. Space cracks would appear, disappearing and reappearing, repeating this process over and over again. Without a doubt, the constantly disappearing and reappearing space cracks indicated that the stability of this spatial fragment had been damaged. Moreover, as time passed, this collapse would become increasingly strong. Eventually, it would sweep through the entire space and completely destroy it, vanishing into nothingness. It was no wonder that the South Shine Nation would be so magnanimous and add this sealed dimension ring to the first place reward. Qin Yu felt helpless and a bit of regret. His vision fell onto a dark red bead of blood in front of him. Although he didn't know why his blood would appear here when he completed the master recognition, he knew its true function the moment he saw it. His divine sense fused into his blood. Then a faint layer of blood red color rapidly expanded outwards, outlining his figure. Pa! As his feet landed on the ground, the pale blood red Qin Yu looked down at his hands and feet. He felt a deep awe towards the transcendent calamity immortal realm existence that had refined the sealed dimension ring. To be able to alter the laws and directly use a drop of blood to condense a body similar to an avatar was already beyond the imagination of ordinary cultivators. Unfortunately, this spatial fragment would be destroyed within 3 to 5 years. Otherwise, if he could control this vast space, it would be of great help to his future cultivation. As this thought flashed through his mind, Qin Yu's condensed figure's eyes widened in shock. In the next moment, the space in front of him rippled like water, gently shaking. Then a thumb-sized lantern slowly but surely squeezed out from within. That's right, it was squeezed out, as if it were withstanding an unimaginable imprisonment. But all of this came to an abrupt end when it truly entered this barren and incomplete spatial fragment. It was as if everything about it had been completely cut off by the nothingness of the outside world, isolated and no longer sensed. Qin Yu had seen the little blue lamp countless times, but he had never felt such an indescribable sense of relaxation from it like today. It was like a towering mountain had been removed from its head, no longer suppressing it. Thus, in the next moment, the little blue lamp truly released its strength without any scruples. An extremely dazzling deep blue light erupted out like a broken dam. It was so bright and dazzling that tears began to flow from Qin Yu's eyes. But Qin Yu's instincts told him that he shouldn't close his eyes, otherwise he would miss out on something extremely important. Thus, as tears streamed down his face, he opened his eyes wide and witnessed a scene that could only be called a miracle. The little blue lamp that erupted with endless, deep blue light slowly flew into the skies above his head. As it rose higher and higher, the pure, deep blue light gradually faded away. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, purple, 7 colors were separated out. Or, it was more accurate to say that these colors formed the deep blue light, dazzling and dazzling. The little blue lamp rose higher and higher, as if it would fly to the ends of space. The 7 colors began to fade, turning into a warm and transparent color. Like this, the little blue lamp that flew into the skies turned into a great sun that couldn't be looked at directly. It sprinkled down endless light, illuminating the earth. Qin Yu was bathed in the warm sunlight. His eyes widened, filled with shock. He discovered that he had never truly understood the little blue lamp. It was actually able to produce such an astonishing change. A sun, through his connection with the little blue lamp, Qin Yu could see through all appearances and find the core of the great sun where the little blue lamp was. But right now, its aura and the light and heat it released were no different from that of a sun. Suddenly, Qin Yu discovered that he had completely fused together with the earth beneath his feet. He closed his eyes and could feel every tiny crack in the distant broken mountain range, as well as a sickly and weak unknown grass deep within it. But at this time, Qin Yu could clearly see that the withered leaves of this grass began to vigorously shake. In just several breaths of time, it was restored to a rich, verdant green, and exuberant vitality began to emit from its body. It seemed that with the arrival of the little blue lamp and the great sun that descended into this world, the grass had also been restored to its vitality. Qin Yu could clearly feel the joy and excitement it exuded. And more importantly, it seemed as if he could control everything in this space with just a thought. After a moment of hesitation, Qin Yu opened his eyes. He lifted a hand and grasped the air. Then, with a fluctuation in space, a complete green grass appeared. Even its inconceivably developed roots that were buried deep underground weren't damaged at all. This was because when Qin sent out his will, the soil that buried the roots were directly repelled by an invisible strength, allowing the grass to regain its freedom. Qin couldn't suppress the shock on his face. He gently touched the grass with his fingers and felt the rough friction. He knew that all of this wasn't an illusion. The verdant branches and leaves cheered as they twined around his hand, conveying their excitement, joy, and gratitude. After a long period of silence, Qin let go of his hand. The grass vanished into thin air, returning to its original position where it was buried in the soil. There wasn't any difference from before. This was because his will was to restore the grass to its original state. Qin didn't know why such an unbelievable scene had appeared in front of him, but he knew that it was related to the little blue lamp. This was because he could clearly feel that it wasn't he who had truly become the master of this world. Rather, it was the little blue lamp that had given him the strength to control everything. This was because the connection between Qin and the little blue lamp had taken another step forward. Yes, when the little blue lamp fused into this space and gave Qin the authority to control everything, they had truly fused together and could no longer be separated. In other words, it was only on this day that Qin truly possessed the little blue lamp. His eyes swept over the shattered earth. Although it was still barren and messy, Qin knew that it was no longer the same as before. It was on the verge of death, but it had become a rebirth. Within his dwelling, Qin eyelashes gently trembled, and he slowly opened his eyes. He was still himself, and his aura hadn't changed at all. But his eyes were a bit more profound, and there was an invisible dignity to them. The reason for that was because he had become the ruler of a certain space. He had grasped supreme authority. This was an invisible change that had brought him. Qin original goal in participating in the South Shine Nation's youth alchemy competition was to obtain the treasure furnace's remnant spirit. But now, it seemed that his greatest harvest was this sealed dimension ring. Qin eyes fell, and the sealed dimension ring faded away. It didn't vanish, but became something that only he could see. This wasn't a function of the sealed dimension ring, but a power that Qin naturally obtained after controlling that space. He took out the fleeting flame cauldron and handed the cauldron's remnant spirit to it. This palm-sized cauldron that was covered in rust suddenly erupted with boundless light. Bright lines appeared on its surface, and then it started burning. Within the flames, all of the impurities and filth that had accumulated on its surface were burned to nothingness, revealing its true form. This was a dazzling pill furnace fragment. Even though it was only a tiny part of it, one could still feel the formidable power contained within. Whoosh! The burning treasure furnace fragment flew into the fleeting flame furnace. Waves of heat instantly erupted, causing the surface of the fleeting flame furnace to turn crimson. Qin eyes flashed. He discovered that at this time he had an inexplicable intuition that the fleeting flame furnace would smoothly absorb the treasure furnace's remnant spirit. He didn't know why he thought this, but he was sure of it. Suppressing these thoughts, Qin turned his head and looked at 9th Province. Although it was silent, Qin could actually feel a trace of sorrow coming from it. Inexplicably, Qin seemed to be infected by it. His mood darkened with it. Then, after 9th Province, he saw the figure of another pill furnace. It was a very, very large pill furnace, so large that the mountains, rivers, and even the endless oceans seemed incomparably small in front of it. It stood tall in the sea of stars, as if it were an indispensable part of the vast starry sky. However, this inconceivably large pill furnace was covered in cracks, as if it had been broken into countless pieces by an unbearable strength. A rich death energy lingered around it. This pill furnace was already dead. As this thought appeared in Qin mind, the scene in front of him suddenly trembled and then vanished from sight. Chapter 341. The machinery of a country could always erupt with unimaginably formidable energy. A temporary transmission array that connected the Marshall Field to the capital city was constructed overnight. After a rigorous test confirmed that there were no problems, the cultivator in charge of this matter respectfully reported back and received a great reward from the royal family's special envoy. Little friends, the transmission array has been prepared and we will immediately arrive at the capital city. Because this is a newly opened transmission route and because time is a bit tight, there might be some bumps during the transmission process. I ask that little friends be patient. Once we arrive at the capital city, it will naturally be more comfortable. The special envoy smiled. His chubby face was filled with warmth, making it easy for others to develop a favorable impression of him. Shua, space twisted. Yuan Ilan, Ming Siyuan, and Yuan Tiangang, 3 Blue Sea super powerhouses, appeared at the same time. The Lord Envoy ran over, bowing and bowing. His manners were so thoughtful that it left one feeling a bit sick of him. Yuan Ilan's eyes flashed with disgust, but he didn't say anything. He only lightly said, "Open the transmission array." He turned and gestured. "Revered Ming, revered Yuan, please." "Exalted Yin, please." The 3 of them stepped into the transmission array. The special envoy didn't show any anger at being treated coldly. He still had a bright smile on his face as he arranged for the 13 young cultivators to enter the range of the array formation. Originally, there should only be 10 people with the qualifications to go to the capital city. But with a single night's buffer, there was room for many things to change. Thus, the number of spots was temporarily increased, turning into these 13 people. "Hold on." Several cultivators ran over with anxious voices. The middle-aged cultivator in the lead had a pale complexion. He clenched his teeth and said, "We agree to Lord Envoy's request. Please allow my son to enter." Beside him, a young cultivator in blue robes was flushed red with excitement. The special envoy smiled. "Patriarch Nandong, I'm really sorry, but the spots have already been decided upon, and it isn't good to change them. If there is a need, perhaps next time." These words nearly caused the Nandong family to vomit blood. Next time, your sister. If they missed out on the chance to refine the revival good fortune pill, who knew how many years it would be before they could do so again? Patriarch Nandong took a deep breath and squeezed out a smile. "I ask Lord Envoy to bend the rules a little. We are willing to pay extra." The special envoy waved his hand, interrupting him. "The transmission array has been opened. I have other matters to attend to, so I won't stay any longer. Farewell." He turned around and walked towards the teleportation portal. How could the juniors of the Nandong family endure this? As the good fortune in front of them flew out of their hands, they clenched their jaws and cursed. "Who do you think you are? You are nothing more than a—" He didn't manage to finish a sentence because the envoy turned around and looked at him indifferently. "Ka! Ka!" It was teeth chattering. Patriarch Nandong's complexion changed. "Special envoy, please show mercy." Yunilan said coldly, "Wu Shang, you dared to do such a disgusting thing and spoil my appetite. I won't forgive you." The envoy hurriedly withdrew his gaze and smiled humbly. "Of course, everything will be as you say." He quickly stepped into the transmission array as if nothing had happened just now. But in the instant that he stepped into the transmission array, the young man from the Nandong clan suddenly slumped to the ground. His body twitched, and thick and foul black blood gushed out from his nose and mouth. It was as if his organs had already rotted away. Patriarch Nandong's body shivered, but he didn't dare to say a single word. He turned and shouted out loud before hurrying away with his only son. Within the transmission array, the 13 young cultivators felt their hearts chill. They never imagined that this Lord's special envoy who smiled before speaking, who was like a gentle spring breeze, was actually such a ruthless and sharp character. Today, they had learned another lesson. It was true that they couldn't judge a book by its cover. In the future, they would have to be a bit more respectful and cautious in front of the Lord's special envoy. A rich spiritual light shot into the skies. The the space in front of them began to twist. In the next moment, the figures of the people within the transmission array vanished from sight. Although the Lord's special envoy had already warned them, the shaking of the transmission array was still unbearable. After an unknown period of time, the dazzling colors in front of them suddenly vanished from sight. Qin Yu hurriedly took a deep breath and suppressed the tumbling in his chest. He didn't even have the mind to pay attention to the scenery around him. Ugh, among the 13 juniors, besides White Fong Fong, there was also a woman. After enduring for several moments, she finally couldn't hold it in any longer. She turned her head and vomited. As she vomited, everyone's patience was completely broken. For a time, filth flew everywhere and a sour and pungent smell billowed outwards. Qin Yu originally wanted to hold on, but he didn't know what his companion, called Wu Yuan, had eaten this morning. The yellow liquid was simply unbearable. Thus, he turned his head and vomited along with everyone else, enjoying himself to his heart's content. The complexions of the 3 Blue Sea super powerhouses didn't change at all. They stepped out of the transmission array, allowing the juniors to throw their filth behind them. The Lord's special envoy had a guilty expression. From time to time, he would walk over and gently pat this and that. He was truly competent to the extreme. Unfortunately, when they saw the special envoy's face, they couldn't help but recall the fate of the young Nandong family cultivator and the mucus that had gushed out from his 7 apertures. Thus, the special envoy helped the youths vomit even more heartily. After a long time, the youths that were causing the pollution finally stopped. They nervously walked out of the transmission array. Luckily, they were worried for nothing. Although there was an extremely high-standard reception team outside the transmission array, it didn't have much to do with them. The South Shine Nation's capital was a place where all the elites of the nation gathered. But the arrival of 3 Blue Sea super powerhouses was enough to make them lower their noble heads. Revered Yun Ming and Yuan were respectfully invited onto a luxurious car that had been waiting for them for a long time. It could be foreseen that there would be a high-class banquet to entertain these 3 Blue Seas. Although the youths also had their own car, it was parked in a corner. It was a common-looking bus that could hold 20 people. And the name bus was indeed a bit strange, but everyone in the entire land of divinity and demons called it this. So the South Shine Nation naturally followed suit. Although the interior of this bus was incomparably comfortable, the difference was far too great when compared to the treatment of the 3 Blue Seas. In particular, the cold expressions of the 3 officials within the bus caused the atmosphere inside to become even more depressing. The reason was simple. These 3 officials were all divine soul realm masters. The reason that proud children of heaven were called proud children of heaven was because they represented the hopes and achievements of the future. Of all of this, the word future was the key. Of the 10 proud children of heaven, at most 3 or 4 would be able to break into divine soul. And of these 3 or 4, those that could take a step further and reach the Blue Sea realm, according to a strict statistical probability, the chances of that happening were minuscule, almost negligible. Thus, when a divine soul cultivator faced these 13 outstanding talents of the South Shine Nation's official tournament, there was no need for them to look up to them. This was why the atmosphere was so depressing. However, there were always accidents. For instance, Qin Yu was currently enjoying a completely different treatment from his 12 other companions. "Fellow Taoist Ning Qin, please sit here." The official smiled. "These 4 chairs were specially customized. We will arrive in a moment, so it will be more comfortable to sit here." Qin Yu expressed his thanks and sat down beside the 3 divine soul cultivators. "Fellow Taoist Ning Qin, how do you feel right now? I heard that the transmission just now was a bit too bumpy. Drink a bottle of ice plum juice and you'll feel a bit better." As he spoke, he took out a jade bottle. From the packaging, one could see that it was high class. After opening it, a light sweet and sour smell wafted out. Just a single breath made one feel much better. Gulp! It was unknown who gulped. But in this depressing atmosphere, it was particularly clear. Qin Yu looked over. This little girl, White Fengfeng's face was flushed red, but she tried her best to maintain her calm. She had an indifferent expression that said, "Why are you looking at me?" He smiled and passed over the plum juice. "You drink it, I feel fine." White Fengfeng had a grateful expression. She thought that Big Brother Bayu really did care for her. She took the bottle and drank to her heart's content. As she glanced over the envious eyes of several people, she revealed a smug look. "Haha, it seems I was negligent and forgot to give a bottle to Miss White. Fellow Taoist Ningqin, you should also drink some." As he spoke, he took out another bottle. Unfortunately, no one else had a share. This contempt was too obvious. Most of the young cultivators in the carriage came from extraordinary backgrounds. In particular, those that had grudges with Qin Yu and White Fengfeng found it hard to endure. For instance, that fellow classmate Zhao Jutian, who had been severely wounded and on the verge of death, had suddenly become full of energy overnight. There was a light cough. Although it wasn't heavy, it could still be heard. The official that took out 2 bottles of plum juice looked at him, but didn't say anything. But everyone soon learned that just because he didn't say anything didn't mean he didn't have any opinions in his heart. The bus stopped in the southeast direction of the capital city, in an area of exquisite and luxurious houses. 3 divine soul cultivators stepped out first. They lightly said, "You will be staying in the capital city for the time being. I will be assigning you your living quarters." Qin Yu's residence was naturally the best. It was near a small lake and was surrounded by lush trees. A light breeze carried with it a light moisture that made one feel refreshed. White Fengfeng was next to him. Although her position was a bit far back, it was still pretty good. Then there was Wu Yuan, who had vomited to the point of intoxication. Looking at his expression, he was also very satisfied with his own residence. Following that was a series of assignments. Black Bei, who had relied on his connections to obtain a spot, was also given an ordinary detached courtyard. Zhao Jiutian couldn't hold himself back any longer. This was because, even now, he still hadn't been assigned a place to live. But all the good courtyards within his line of sight already had an owner. Although it didn't matter where a cultivator lived, they still had to consider something like face. In particular, our classmate Zhao Jiutian. His background was extraordinary, and although the competition was disrupted, the upper 5th grade child and Mother Yin Pill was more than enough to be proud of. "Cough! May I ask the 3 of you, where will I live?" The plum juice official had a faint expression. "Fellow Taoist Zhao Jiutian, the courtyards here have already been arranged. I will have to trouble you to live across from us." Following his gaze, Zhao Jiutian nearly fainted from anger. His complexion paled as if he had swallowed a giant fly. The youth sighed inwardly. This official was truly worthy of being a cultivator of the capital city. He didn't give Cleansing Temple any face at all. His actions were so overbearing. Chapter 342. Zhao Jiutian was filled with anger, but he didn't dare to reveal it. This was because he could see from the eyes of the 3 divine soul cultivators that they were eager to try. It was clear that if he didn't know what was good for him and continued to cause trouble, the 3 of them would be very happy. Seeing Zhao Jiutian admit defeat, the 3 divine soul cultivators didn't insist. They simply gave him a few simple instructions. After the torment of the transmission array, the youths were a bit dispirited. After learning that they would be notified of further arrangements, they bid their farewells and returned to their residences to rest. Qin Yu pushed open the door and entered. There were no maids in the small courtyard. He was satisfied with this. He casually walked around and didn't sense anything wrong, so he felt a bit more at ease. Thinking about it, if the dignified South Shine Nation had to use such despicable methods on juniors like them, then that would be looked down upon too much. However, out of caution, Qin Yu laid down an array formation and took out 9th Province to isolate it from prying eyes. Then he began to swallow pills. However, The pills he refined had been used up during this period of time, and he didn't have much left. He would need to find some time to refine some more. As for materials, he had plenty in his storage ring, so there was no need to purchase them for now. The next day, Qin Yu didn't receive any notice from the South Shine Nation officials. Instead, an acquaintance arrived. "Auntie Hong." Qin Yu saw the person outside the door and the eyes peeking out from beneath her hood. His thoughts stirred, and he moved to the side to let her in. Auntie Hong swept her eyes around. Qin Yu knew what she was thinking. He smiled and said, "It's fine. It's safe here." "That's good." Auntie Hong pulled off her hood and let out a long breath. She didn't slow down at all. "Mr. Qin, after you obtained first place in the competition, we wanted to contact you, but we were all refused by the South Shine Nation officials. It was only when we heard that the Revival Good Fortune pill had been restarted that we felt relieved." This was an explanation for the inn's silence. Although Qin Yu didn't care much about this, he still felt a bit better. "Auntie Hong, is there something you need from me today?" Auntie Hong observed Qin Yu's expression. Seeing that he wasn't dissatisfied, she relaxed and her expression became calm. "I came to congratulate Mr. Qin for obtaining first place in the competition. The young master already knows of this matter. It's just that he has important matters to attend to and can't leave for the time being. So he asked me to give this to Mr. Qin as a congratulatory gift." As Auntie Hong spoke, she carefully took out a wooden box. Qin Yu took it. This jade box was very light and there wasn't anything strange about it. But after opening it, a dignified expression appeared on his face. After several breaths of silence, he said, "This gift is too precious." Auntie Hong smiled. "Young master said that this is what Mr. deserves. The inn has already obtained a great harvest from you." Qin Yu thought for a moment and nodded. "All right, then I ask Auntie Hong to express my thanks for me." The young master was the true master of the inn, and his background was extremely mysterious. Since Auntie Hong didn't say much, Qin Yu didn't ask too much. Auntie Hong let out a sigh of relief. "It's good that you accept it. I was afraid that Mr. Qin wouldn't want it. What a headache." Qin Yu couldn't help but shake his head. "I can modestly decline this sort of treasure, but I still can't bear to let it go." Auntie Hong was amused. "That's good. I've already taken a risk by coming here, so I won't stay any longer. I hope that Mr. Qin can smoothly refine the Revival Good Fortune pill." She bid her farewells and left. Before leaving, she gave Qin Yu a jade slip. Inside was information regarding the Revival Good Fortune pill. This caused a smile to appear on Qin Yu's face. What he disliked the most were the unknowns of things. In this aspect, the inn had helped him a great deal. However, Qin Yu wasn't in a hurry to look at the information in the jade slip. Instead, he placed the wooden box in front of him once more. Inside, there was a branch as thick as a finger, green all over. It looked as if it had just been cut off from the tree this morning. The cut was still fresh, as if one could touch it with their hand, and it was slightly moist. But although this tree branch looked ordinary, it really wasn't ordinary at all. Qin Yu could clearly feel a massive amount of energy hidden within. Once this energy was activated, the protection it formed would be something that even an ordinary Blue Sea Realm Supermaster might not be able to break in a single strike. This was why Qin Yu said that it was far too precious. These words were the truth. However, Qin Yu didn't feel any unease as he accepted it. He had indeed helped the inn a great deal, and both sides could be considered to have gained something. After putting away this tree branch that could save his life in a critical moment, Qin Yu picked up the jade slip. After sensing that everything was normal, he probed it with his divine sense. A moment later, with a loud cracking sound, the jade slip disintegrated into powder that sprinkled down from his fingertips. Qin Yu opened his eyes, revealing a dignified expression. As he thought, the refinement of the Revival Good Fortune pill wasn't ordinary at all. Around noon, the South Shine Nation officials arrived. Qin Yu pushed open the door and walked out. The other young cultivators that had been chosen had basically all arrived. The last one to arrive was Zhao Jiutian. There was nothing he could do about it. This direct descendant of Cleansing Temple lived far away. The ones who came today weren't the 3 people that had escorted them yesterday. Instead, the one leading them was the Lord's special envoy. Seeing his familiar, smiling expression, even the dissatisfied Zhao Jiutian felt his heart tighten. He quickly restrained his gloomy expression. I fear that little friends will be staying in the capital city for a period of time. Allow me to introduce myself so that we can all get along in the future. The Lord's special envoy smiled. My surname is Qin, and my name is Wushang. I am temporarily the chief steward of the royal palace, commonly known as an errand boy. I have no specific duties and follow the will of the nation ruler. I will go wherever I need to. The 13 young cultivators all bowed once more. Chief Steward Qin smiled and waved his hand. Little friends, you are all proud sons of heaven, and your future achievements will be limitless. I don't dare to be arrogant. You and I will treat each other as equals. Of course, it was best to listen to these words. If they took them seriously, then they would truly be reckless. All right, the reason I came here today is to invite all of you to observe the Good Fortune Tablet. It's getting late, so let's set off. The people weren't the people from yesterday, and the bus was still the same bus. Qin Yu chose a seat and nodded towards White Feng Feng before closing his eyes to meditate. His performance caused the hostile and provocative schoolmate Zhao Jiutian to have nowhere to vent his resentment. He felt a great deal of suffocation in his chest. Luckily, schoolmate Zhao Jiutian had a good ability to adjust himself. He thought that once he began refining the revival good fortune pill, he would thoroughly crush Qin Yu beneath his feet. Not only did he lose the competition, but the great desolate lake had taken advantage of his weakness. If it weren't for the fact that the South Shine Nation had restarted refining the revival good fortune pill, his fate wouldn't have been any better. Towards the Qin Yu who had caused all of this, it was reasonable for Zhao Jiutian to hate him. The bus traveled in silence. An hour later, they arrived outside a heavily guarded square building. After stepping off the bus, there was a wide and straight road. However, this road was incomparably cold and deserted. Looking around, there wasn't even half a shadow. Chief Steward Qin personally appeared. Everything proceeded smoothly. After the guards verified their identities, they opened the incomparably heavy iron doors. Someone was already waiting inside. Greetings, Lord Chief Steward. Wei Ziqing respectfully bowed. Although this Chief Steward Qin didn't have a good reputation, such as being greedy, ruthless, violent, and so on and so forth, he had been able to sit firmly in the position of the royal palace's chief steward for so many years. Just this point alone was enough to earn his respect. Chief Steward Qin warmly smiled. Lord Wei, there is no need to be so polite. I was ordered to bring these 13 little friends here today. I will have to trouble you with the following matters. He turned and continued to say, I will wait here for these little friends to come out. There is no need to worry about the first day. Just consider this a time to adapt. Wei Ziqing stood up. Lord Chief Steward, please wait a moment. Once I have arranged everything, I will rush over to greet you. A few days ago, I obtained a new wild turtle. Knowing that Chief Steward Qin was coming, I slaughtered it last night and stewed it. It will be ready to eat later. Chief Steward Qin's eyes brightened. Then I'll have to trouble Lord Wei. Both sides bid their farewells. Wei Ziqing and the 4 cultivators behind him led the 13 young cultivators deep into the 4-room building. As he spoke with the Lord Chief Steward, Lord Wei Ziqing appeared kind and amiable. But after he left, his aura was as cold as a stone. His entire body, from top to bottom, seemed to emit a cold and gloomy aura from every pore. As for the 4 people behind him, their complexions were deathly pale. They didn't say a word, as if they were corpses buried underground all year round. Their eyes were so cold that it caused one's heart to tremble. They passed through a long passage. Torches leapt on both sides, illuminating everyone's complexions and making them appear a bit gloomy and strange. This passage was very long. At the end was a large black door that seemed to be one with the surrounding thick black rock. With just a glance, one could feel its formidable defensive capabilities. Wei Ziqing took out a token. A beam of light fell from his head and swept over the token. With 2 light beeps, the black door quietly opened. However, this door seemed to contain some unimaginable strength. It caused space to distort, making it impossible to see what was inside. The good fortune tablet is inside. The 4 of them will stand guard here. After 12 hours, whether or not they have harvests, they must leave. As Wei Ziqing coldly spoke, he turned and left. His actions were straightforward and efficient. The 4 cultivators standing guard outside the black door were expressionless. The feeling they gave off was that they were 4 door gods with paralyzed faces. Although these 4 people hadn't released the least bit of a powerful aura, there was one thing that was beyond doubt. They were extremely dangerous. No one thought that they would be able to approach the good fortune tablet so easily. The South Shine Nation officials didn't send anyone to follow them. Were they not afraid that they would damage the tablet? Zhao Jutian sneered. Stop dreaming. The good fortune tablet is a rare treasure of the heavens and earth. Not even a blue sea supreme elder can damage it in the slightest. As he spoke, he stepped forwards and was the first to step through the door. The young cultivators were stunned. They thought that this was truly worthy of being a direct disciple of Cleansing Temple. He even knew these secrets. Just as they thought this, they cursed at how despicable he was. They quickly followed, as if they were afraid that if they fell behind, they wouldn't be able to refine the revival good fortune pill. Qin Yu wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he looked around. In this short period of time, the only ones left outside were him, White Feng Feng, and Black Bebe. The 4 guards were expressionless and didn't seem to have any intention of rushing them. It was like their duty was to act as a human alarm clock that would remind everyone to leave after 12 hours. White Feng Feng blinked. Ning Qin, fellow Taoist, is there something wrong? Qin Yu's eyes flashed with embarrassment. How could he have seen anything wrong? He had only subconsciously wanted to delay for some time. He shook his head and said, "It's nothing. Let's go in." As he spoke, he led the way through the door. Although there was only a single step between the inside and outside, it was like 2 completely different worlds. A dark golden light sprinkled down. It wasn't dazzling, but rather quiet and restrained. As one bathed in it, they could clearly feel the rich aura of endless years. This should be a naturally formed cave. Above them, there were all sorts of strangely shaped rocks that had been corroded. Beneath this golden light, they seemed to be plated with a mysterious hue. And the source of this dark golden light came from the center of the cave. There was a stone tablet that stood on the ground. The stone tablet was over 10 feet high and wasn't too large. But as long as anyone saw it, they would feel that it was terrifyingly high, as if it stood there supporting the world. Chapter 343. Regarding this stone tablet, the jade slip that the inn had given him contained some groundless and groundless legends. But since they had been passed down, there was at least some truth to them. The general idea was as follows. 100,000 years ago, the vault of heaven suddenly collapsed and a great stone tablet descended from the void. After a fierce struggle, it was obtained by the Huluin clan. Then, after 10,000 years, the influence of the clan continued to grow. Finally, they established the South Shine Nation, continuing on for dozens of generations without perishing. Finally, they became a royal bloodline with a deep background in the land of divinity and demons. The great stone tablet here referred to the good fortune tablet. There were many other theories, but in summary, the general meaning was the same. The Huluin clan's prosperity was because they possessed this stone tablet. As for what the truth was, no one knew. But it was an indisputable fact that the good fortune tablet possessed unimaginable might. It was just that the way this might was displayed was a bit different. Cultivators, and only those that didn't surpass 100 years of age, could face the stone tablet and perceive the mysterious pill recipe. The pill they refined was the Revival Good Fortune pill. This pill recipe existed within the soul, as if it were a gift from the will of the world. It was impossible to describe, nor could it be spoken of to others. Only the one perceiving it could control it. But there was one point that could be confirmed after countless tests of refining the Revival Good Fortune pill. That was that no cultivator could perceive a pill recipe that was different from the others. However, there was one point that was similar, and that was that to refine the Revival Good Fortune pill, one needed to consume the lifespan of the alchemist. Although something like lifespan was illusory, to a cultivator it was something that they could sense. It was an important existence that no one could ignore. After all, in the end, all living beings had a spirit and cultivated in order to complete a transformation of their life. They wanted to become more perfect, more powerful, and at the same time, they could live longer. Objectively speaking, the latter was the most important factor. Thus, a pill that consumed one's lifespan was incomparably strange and chilling. If it weren't for the fact that after refining the Revival Good Fortune pill, one could offer a sacrifice to the Good Fortune tablet and obtain rich feedback from it, no one would have any interest in this pill. That's right, in order to refine the Revival Good Fortune pill, one had to offer it as a sacrifice to the Good Fortune tablet. There were even some people that made extremely bold speculations about this. The Good Fortune tablet had a life of its own, a life form that they couldn't recognize. The reason it accepted the sacrifices was to absorb the lifespan of the cultivators that were sacrificed, allowing it to continue living. Thus, the Good Fortune tablet's gift was more like an exchange of some sort of trade. Qin Yu originally didn't believe these rumors. This was because this was just a stone tablet. Even if it contained a tremendous amount of power, how could it possibly possess life? But at this time, as he stood here and truly saw the Good Fortune tablet, he discovered that his previous views had been wrong. There were no words on the surface of the Good Fortune tablet. There were only dark, golden textures that wove together. They were like wild weeds, but they also seemed to contain the highest mysteries of the world. It emitted a dark golden light that was majestic and vast. Its majestic aura was hidden, as if the slightest tremble could cause the world to tremble. Mysterious and powerful. But at this time, Qin Yu passed through the incomparably dazzling surface of the Good Fortune tablet and saw what was hidden within. This kind of thing was called old, weak, or rotten. That's right. This was what Qin Yu felt when he saw the Good Fortune tablet. He was well aware that this was the inconceivable ability he had obtained after thoroughly fusing with the little blue lamp and becoming the ruler of that distant space. None of this was an illusion. At this time, everything that the Good Fortune tablet revealed was fake. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed the shaking in his heart. He maintained a calm expression. He discovered that after he saw through the Good Fortune tablet, he could faintly smell the nauseating smell of decay that it emitted. This smell was 10 times, 100 times richer than a corpse that had been buried underground for dozens of days. But besides him, Zhao Jiutian, White Fong Fong, and the others seemed to be enjoying the feeling of approaching the Good Fortune tablet. They took deep breaths, as if they could absorb the most wonderful energy in the world. At this time, Qin Yu's heart chilled. He faintly understood why Wei Ziqing would turn around and leave without hesitation, and also why he told them that they could only stay for 12 hours at most. Perhaps in a relatively safe situation, this was the limit of what they could withstand. The rotten smell that lingered in his nose became increasingly heavy. Even if he held his breath, he still couldn't stop it from invading his senses. Qin Yu could only shift his attention elsewhere. He no longer looked at the Good Fortune tablet itself, but focused on its surface. As he looked at the dark, golden textures, the rotten smell began to dissipate. At this time, the youths that entered the cave, besides Qin had all arrived near the good fortune tablet. They sat down cross-legged, suppressing the excitement in their hearts. With the mentality of a pilgrimage, they began to carefully perceive the dark, golden textures on the surface of the good fortune tablet. This was because countless cultivators that had obtained good fortune from the good fortune tablet had clearly said that these textures were the only way to obtain an alchemy room. Zhao Zhutian sat down cross-legged, doing his best to calm the shock and excitement in his heart. Just by sitting near the good fortune tablet and bathing in the dark golden light, his entire body felt warm. It was like his magic power and divine sense had become lively. Some of the shackles in his cultivation began to show signs of loosening. This was truly worthy of being the legendary supreme treasure of the South Shine Nation. Zhao Zhutian's heart burned with an increasingly fiery heat. He had even greater expectations towards the good fortune tablet's gift. But the premise was that he had to perceive the pill recipe and smoothly refine the revival good fortune pill. He swept his eyes around. The young cultivators from all over had already begun to perceive the good fortune tablet. Qin Yu's lonely figure was particularly conspicuous in the back. Seeing his silence, Zhao Zhutian coldly sneered inwardly. Qin Yu really was someone who had never seen the world before. After seeing the good fortune tablet, his mind had already been seized. With such a shrewd temperament, he still wanted to refine the revival good fortune pill? Dream on, Ning Qin. This time I will thoroughly trample you beneath my feet. I will return all the humiliation you gave me in double. Zhao Zhutian's eyes revealed a strong self-confidence. He glanced around. Seeing that no one was paying attention to him, he flipped his hand and took out a pill. Indeed, perceiving the pill recipe of the revival good fortune pill mainly depended on the cultivator themselves. But there were some necessary supplementary conditions that could increase the chances of success. This pill was personally given to him by revered Cloud the Knight before he left. He clearly stated that it would be of great help to him when perceiving the good fortune tablet. With revered Yuan status, he wouldn't speak without thinking. Thus, Zhao Zhutian had great expectations for this pill. Opening his mouth and swallowing it, Zhao Zhutian's eyes widened. This was because he discovered that the good fortune tablet in front of him had become incomparably clear. Those dark golden textures seemed to be engraved into his eyes, and he could clearly see where they extended and twisted. Between his consciousness there was a faint hazy feeling, as if there was a bit more mist. Then the dark golden textures in front of him began to slowly twist, as if they wanted to outline some sort of mark. Zhao Zhutian was ecstatic. He had heard of this scene before. Without a doubt, this was the sign that the pill recipe was about to appear. As he thought, the pill that revered Yuan had given him contained an inconceivable strength. He, Zhao Zhutian, would become the first person to perceive the pill recipe. His eyes swept around, looking at all the people that were painstakingly perceiving the pill recipe. His heart was filled with pride. None of them had even seen the door, but he had already stepped into it. This time, he would let everyone know that he was the strongest alchemist of the South Shine Nation's younger generation. As his heart was filled with lofty sentiments, Zhao Zhutian suddenly discovered that there was a pair of eyes staring at him, filled with shock. It was Ning Qin. This attention just happened to satisfy the regret in Zhao Zhutian's heart. Moreover, he was seen by the person he hated the most, Ning Qin. Without a doubt, he was even happier. "Ha! Ning Qin, do you see? I, Zhao Zhutian, have already walked ahead of you." Satisfied, he left behind a cold and mocking gaze. Then he looked away and began to fully focus on perceiving. Every second seemed to bring him great harvests. His face gradually flushed red with endless excitement. Indeed, Qin Yu was looking at classmate Zhao with shock. At this time, classmate Zhao's body was trembling slightly, as if he were intoxicated. Just now, he had inadvertently seen Zhao Jutian swallow a pill. Just as he was wondering what he was doing, he saw what happened next. The rotting stench that filled the entire cave, as well as the thick aura of decay that made it hard to breathe, seemed to be pulled by an invisible strength. After a brief period of silence, it began to gather without warning, forming a nearly pitch-black fog that covered Zhao Jutian. Every time he took a breath, he would breathe in endless rotting and decaying aura. Even the pores on his body were cheering as they opened and breathed in and out. His face revealed an expression of incomparable enjoyment and intoxication. His eyebrows were filled with joy and excitement, as if he had obtained a tremendous harvest as he breathed in and out. Qin Yu's chest tumbled. Luckily, he had experience with the transmission array and was able to barely suppress the urge to vomit. He quickly looked away, not daring to look again. But in his heart, he vaguely realized something. The cultivator sitting in front of the good fortune tablet should be absorbing this rotting and decaying aura in order to obtain the pill recipe for the revival good fortune pill. He glanced at the dazed and excited white Feng. Qin Yu had an impulse to remind her, but in the end he remained silent. He couldn't take any risks. The slightest bit of carelessness could cause irreparable consequences. Moreover, since he had set a 12-hour limit, that meant she wouldn't suffer any irreparable harm. Qin Yu apologized inwardly. Then he sat down cross-legged and put on a solemn and excited appearance. Then he began to daydream. Yes, Qin Yu was only earnestly daydreaming. After seeing through the essence of the revival good fortune pill, it was naturally impossible for him to refine it on his own initiative, even though this would bring him rich rewards. This was because he had no way of knowing what would happen if he refined the revival good fortune pill and sacrificed it to this increasingly strange and sinister good fortune tablet. What Qin Yu was considering right now was to delay for some time. It would be best if he didn't refine the revival good fortune pill until the world-killing tribulation arrived, but this wasn't too realistic. After all, only by approaching the South Shine Nation's old ancestor could he survive the world-killing tribulation. If he didn't refine the revival good fortune pill, he wouldn't be able to obtain the attention of the South Shine Nation's old ancestor, and he wouldn't be able to approach him. This was an unsolvable problem. Qin Yu suppressed this problem that gave him a headache. He thought to himself that he would delay for as long as he could. Chapter 344. 12 hours couldn't be said to be long, but it wasn't short either. After being in a daze for too long, one would inevitably feel bored. Cultivating was certainly the best choice to pass the time, but cultivating here wasn't a good choice at all. Qin Yu's eyes couldn't help but fall onto the surface of the stone tablet, onto the dark golden lines that wove together. At first, he only wanted to pass the time. After all, these lines themselves were very beautiful. But after an unknown period of time, his entire mind was immersed within them. It was like an entire world. There was nothing else left but him and these dark golden lines. In this trance-like state, even the good fortune tablet itself was ignored. Only these beautiful lines became increasingly clear, as if they were branded into his mind, impossible to erase. The dark golden lines in front of him began to twist. In Qin Yu's eyes, they turned into countless meridian-like existences, with unknown substances flowing within. However, most of these dark golden lines were already blocked and withered. There were many spots on them, and they were no longer able to smoothly flow through. When Qin Yu's attention focused on one of the blocked dark golden lines, he seemed to hear a pained gasp in his ears. He could feel the longing coming from it. As this longing poured into his mind, it transformed into information that only Qin Yu could sense. A throbbing feeling gushed out from deep within his heart. Qin Yu was startled awake, his eyes filled with shock. This is a pill recipe. At almost the same time, deep within the South Shine Nation's royal palace, on an altar deep underground, 9 oil lamps were placed in a circle. The flickering dark green flames faintly illuminated a figure sitting cross-legged within, a figure that resembled a skeleton. Suddenly, this figure's eyes opened. Like two bolts of lightning, they instantly tore through the darkness. On the first day, someone had managed to perceive the pill recipe for the revival good fortune pill. This was an unprecedented matter. Could that junior Ningqin really be the turning point for this person to change his destiny and obtain a new life? The skeletal figure lifted a hand and pointed at the void. That thin and withered finger seemed as if it would break at the slightest bit of force. But at this time, an incomparably formidable strength gushed out from his fingertip. This strength pierced through the void, crossing a great distance and falling on the edge of the capital city, in a heavily guarded square building. In a certain grand hall, a large bell that was covered in a thick layer of dust began to ring without any warning. The deep and penetrating sound instantly resounded in all directions. Chief Steward Qin, who was sitting across from him, eating and drinking to his heart's content, suddenly looked up. His eyes flashed, and he shouted, "Lord Wei!" Wei Ziqing had already stood up. The drunkenness on his face had completely disappeared. He stood up and said, "Chief Steward, please wait a moment. I will go immediately." She turned to leave, but Qin Wushang couldn't wait any longer. After a moment of hesitation, he strode after her. "Ha ha ha, I found it. Pill formula. This is a pill formula." Zhao Jiutian threw his head back and laughed heartily. His excited voice reverberated ceaselessly, jolting everyone back to their senses and causing them to reveal expressions of bewilderment. The first thought that popped into the minds of the youths was that this was impossible. In a short day, he had only managed to adapt to the good fortune tablet's aura. So how could he possibly perceive the pill recipe? However, what happened next completely shattered their hopes of getting lucky. The black door quietly opened and Wei Ziqing strode in. Following behind him was a joyful chief, Steward Qin, who comprehended the pill recipe. Zhao Jiutian stood up and bowed. "Lord Wei, Chief Steward Qin, it is this junior." A warm smile bloomed on Wei Ziqing's face. So it was little friend Zhao Jiutian. "You are truly a proud son of heaven," he praised. Chief Steward Qin frowned inwardly. He swept his eyes over Qinyu, who seemed to be at a loss for what to do. He was surprised that it wasn't him. However, even if it wasn't him, it was still a good thing that someone had successfully perceived the pill recipe on the first day. Little friend Zhao Jiutian is truly worthy of being a direct descendant of Cleansing Temple. To be able to perceive the pill recipe on the first day, this is the first time this has happened since the revival good fortune pill has been refined. Chief Steward Qin turned and smiled. "Lord Wei, I will have to trouble you to look after little friend Zhao. You must satisfy all of little friend Zhao's needs so that he can successfully refine the pill as soon as possible." Wei Ziqing laughed. "Of course, little friend Zhao, from today on, there is no need for you to rush back and forth. You can stay here, and if there is anything you need, feel free to ask." Zhao Jiutian was overjoyed. "Thank you, Lord Wei, Chief Steward Qin." He swept his eyes around. Although he tried his best to remain calm, the arrogance in his eyes was still clear. Wherever he looked, the young cultivators all lowered their heads. Although they didn't want to admit it, Zhao Jiutian's performance was far, far better than theirs. Finally, his eyes stopped on Qinyu. After discovering his stunned expression, Zhao Jiutian felt even more carefree. "Ningqin, Ningqin, today is the day that I wash away my shame and become famous once more." The high-spirited Zhao Jiutian was led away by Wei Ziqing and Chief Steward Qin with a smile. It could be foreseen that he would receive the best reception. After this interruption, the young cultivators no longer had the mood to continue perceiving the good fortune tablet. Thus, today's session ended early and they were let out. The bus was silent, with no one in the mood to speak. Today, everyone had come together, but when they left, someone had already obtained the right to stay behind. They were all proud and arrogant youths. Although they had lowered their heads, they still weren't convinced in their hearts. They gathered their strength, and raging flames ignited in their hearts. White Fong Fong was a bit puzzled. She looked at Qin for a moment. His eyes were closed in meditation, and his expression hadn't changed at all from when he came. Didn't he feel a bit disappointed? She immediately thought that this was the attitude that her big brother Bayu should have. So what if he fell behind for a while? There would always be a time when he would catch up. Hum. Her big brother Bayu was truly the best. But how could this little girl know that her big brother Bayu wasn't just disappointed, he was overjoyed. He almost wanted to shout out 3 times. Classmate Zhao Jiutian was a good person. A good person, a very good person. If it weren't for him also perceiving the pill recipe, Qin feared he would have been in a dire situation. In fact, he might even be forced to start refining the revival good fortune pill. Moreover, most importantly, once he began refining the pill, no matter how much he didn't want to succeed, he wouldn't dare to play any tricks during the refining process. This was because every time the revival good fortune pill failed, what was lost was the lifespan of the refiner. This was far too terrifying. So, if possible, Qin really wanted to give his classmate Zhao Jiutian a giant plaque. Written on it, an unrivaled good man. The bus silently returned to their residence. After White Fong Fong stepped off, she turned around and said, "Ning Qin, you can definitely do it. You can do it." This little girl decided to give her big brother Bayu some moral support. But she ignored the pressure that these words might bring. Everyone that was preparing to leave suddenly stopped, their eyes falling onto Qin Yu's body. As the first-ranked participant of the competition, and someone who was also highly regarded by the South Shan Nation officials, Zhao Jiutian had actually taken the lead and was the first to perceive the revival good fortune pill recipe. The pressure, he felt, should be the greatest. Thinking of this, everyone felt the pressure in their chests loosen a little and their breathing became smoother. Humans were worldly beings, and they instinctively liked to compare themselves. When they discovered that someone was having a harder time than them, they would subconsciously feel relaxed. Oh, there's someone worse than me. White Fong Fong noticed the change in the atmosphere. She didn't like the way some people looked at her big brother Bayu, but she didn't care about being angry. She only wanted to explain to her big brother Bayu that she hadn't done it on purpose. But the more anxious she was, the more she didn't know what to say. Her face flushed red and she was about to cry. Qin Yu smiled, comforting her with his eyes. "You can do it too." His voice was calm and gentle, without the anger and shame that everyone imagined. Instead, there was a bit of indifference. This caused the young cultivators to be startled. Then they felt a bit embarrassed and quickly lowered their heads to leave. This was because Qin Yu's current performance made them feel that their mental fortitude was far too poor. Without saying anything more, Qin Yu nodded and left. The next day, the bus arrived on time. Chief Steward Qin's smiling face appeared in front of everyone once more. "Little friends, I obtained a pleasant surprise yesterday. I hope that you can continue to work hard today." He swept his smiling eyes over Qin Yu and nodded in greeting. Then he took a seat at the front. In the square building, behind Wei Ziqing stood an imposing and dignified youth. This was Zhao Jiutian. His eyes swept over the people who had arrived, pausing on Qin Yu for a moment. His lips curved up in a smile. Chief Steward Qin smiled. "Little friend Zhao, did you rest well last night?" Zhao Jiutian respectfully bowed in return. The incense that Chief Steward Qin sent is indeed of the highest quality. After a dreamless night, I have fully recovered my spirit. This conversation caused the youths behind the chief steward to feel envy. Wei Ziqing smiled. "Little friend, Zhao has decided to observe for another day. After careful consideration, you can begin refining." Chief Steward Qin nodded. That should be the case. After all, refining the revival good fortune pill is not a trivial matter. His eyes were full of praise. "Little friend Zhao is so cautious and isn't arrogant or rash. It is truly rare. I believe that you can refine the revival good fortune pill in the shortest time possible. Zhao Jiutian cupped his hands together. This junior will do his best to not disappoint Chief Steward and Lord Wei. Wei Ziqing smiled. That's enough. I will send little friend Zhao in first. Chief Steward Qin, please wait here for a moment. We will continue to taste the remaining half a jar of old wine from yesterday. Yesterday, because Zhao Jiutian was perceiving the pill recipe, Qin Wushang had already broken the rules by following him in. These words were a reminder. Chief Steward Qin smiled and nodded, as if he didn't notice anything. Good. Lord Wei, please return quickly. If you are late and I finish drinking the wine, then don't blame me. Wei Ziqing laughed and left. After passing through the passageway, the black door appeared in sight. Wei Ziqing whispered several more words to Zhao Jiutian and patted his shoulder. Then he opened the door and left. Zhao Jiutian straightened himself. He didn't bother to hide his eyes as he coldly looked at him. Ning Qin, you need to hurry up. Don't fall too far behind me, otherwise it will be too boring. Ridicule, disdain, and a lofty attitude mixed in with it. It was more than just overbearing to describe it. Moreover, after this schoolmate Zhao finished speaking, he flicked his sleeves and walked back into the cave, not caring at all about how Qin responded. He was truly arrogant and carefree. Chapter 345. White Fong Fong angrily said, What's so great about it? Isn't it just luck that you were a step faster? It's still unknown who will refine the revival good fortune, pill first. These words caused the young cultivators to be excited. Although they didn't dare to say it so bluntly, they all had this thought in their hearts. They didn't bother with taunting Ning Qin anymore, and strode into the cave. Qin Yu smiled at White Fong Fong and stepped into the cave. What was different from what everyone imagined was that after he luckily escaped yesterday, he had already made a decision that he wouldn't meditate on the good fortune tablet's dark golden runes for the next several days. However, he didn't plan on wasting these 12 hours. He closed his eyes as if he were fully immersed in meditation, but his divine sense quietly fused into the sealed dimension ring on his hand. A familiar feeling of divine sense wrapping around him and Qin Yu's divine sense appeared in the distant spatial fragment. His divine sense fused into the blood in front of him, forming a divine sense body. Qin Yu took a deep breath, and an unprecedented feeling of relaxation emerged from deep within his heart. Because this was a world that belonged to him. In the distant horizon, at the end of the spatial fragment, those space cracks still existed, but the frequency at which they appeared had decreased by a great deal. The earth in front of him was still in a messy state, but Qin Yu could keenly sense that it was in the process of recovering. Those terrifying, abyss-like cracks were shrinking, but the extent was too small. If it weren't for this space being in Qin Yu's perception, he wouldn't have noticed this at all. Faint traces of weak spiritual strength drilled out from the earth, fusing into the air. Although it was still incomparably thin, this was an obvious improvement. Perhaps as time passed, this space would be restored to its original appearance in the future, and it might even become more stable and formidable. This was because it was no longer the original. With the support of the little blue lamp, any miracle was possible. His thoughts stirred. Qin Yu reached out his hand and grasped the air. A blade of green grass appeared in front of him. This was the only life left in this space. After the spatial fragment was reborn, it began to display its formidable survival abilities. The extremely thin spiritual strength in the air was slowly swallowed into its body. Perhaps it was because its previous life had been far too difficult, but even this weak spiritual strength was enough to allow it to live well. Compared to when it first appeared, its branches and leaves were a full circle larger. Although it was only a stalk of grass, the fact that it could become the only living creature in this spatial fragment after the catastrophe was enough to prove that it was extraordinary. If it was brought out of this spatial fragment and came into contact with the extremely rich heaven and earth, spiritual strength of the land of divinity and demons, it would likely grow in a short period of time and reveal its true terror. As this thought flashed through his mind, he discovered that the green grass in his hand began to gently shiver, as if a great fear were born within it. His eyes flickered as he slowly said, "You don't want to leave this place?" The tender green leaves of the grass swayed even though there was no wind. It was obvious that they were nodding. Qin Yu was silent for a moment. Then he smiled. "Good. Since you don't want to leave, then you can stay here." He let go and the grass disappeared, returning to the place where it grew. With a step forwards, invisible steps seemed to appear in the void, supporting his figure and allowing him to step into the skies. Strong winds howled high in the skies, but they didn't even touch the hem of Qin Yu's clothes. When they were 100 feet away, the winds parted on their own and then reformed another 100 feet away. Looking down at this spatial fragment that was 100 miles wide, Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He lifted a hand and gently stroked it. In the distance, the earth began to rumble and shake. Countless pieces of earth and rocks were pushed forward by an invisible strength, tumbling into the distance. This wave appeared out of nowhere. Wherever it passed, it erased all traces, causing the earth to become flat once more. At the base of the mountain, the crushed stones that nearly buried the river began to fly away, piling up on the riverbank and raising the river. The slightly tilted mountain peak emitted a deep, rumbling sound. Then, as if it were being lifted up by the hands of a demon god, it slowly straightened up until it stood tall on the earth. The speed at which space repaired itself was far too slow. Since Qin Yu possessed the strength to control this space, he could naturally speed up this process. Unfortunately, all he could do was repair the surface, the stability of the spatial fragment, the lack of spiritual strength, the withering of life. All of this required a long time to truly restore itself. At this time, Qin Yu seemed to have become the incarnation of the legendary divine god that created the heavens and earth. Wherever he looked, everything would change according to his will, flattening the earth, rebuilding the river, straightening the mountains. All of these miraculous scenes left Qin Yu's heart filled with excitement. But as time passed, this excitement would eventually fade away. Thus, a trace of curiosity began to appear. Qin Yu wanted to know, why did he possess this strength that allowed him to control everything? Of course, he knew that this was a right bestowed upon him by the little blue lamp. But why? Or, to be more precise, what did the little blue lamp give him that allowed him to accomplish this? Qin Yu's thoughts stirred. He transmitted his questions to the spatial fragment. Then, in the world around him, countless blurry phantoms appeared. These phantoms were mostly broken. Some were even cut off at the waist, appearing in an incomparably broken state. Even so, with just a single glance, Qin Yu could feel an incomparably formidable strength contained within these broken phantoms. This was a strength that seemed to contain all things, a strength that could cover all. It was irresistible. Suddenly, these phantoms trembled for a moment before vanishing. Qin Yu was enlightened. The current spatial fragment wasn't strong enough to support their true appearance. He looked up at the sun that emitted endless light and heat. After a moment of silence, just as Qin Yu thought he wouldn't receive a response, the little blue lamp emitted a clear fluctuation. "Rules!" These two words entered his mind, setting off thunderous, rumbling waves. Qin Yu's pupils shrank. He finally understood what those blurry phantoms he saw just now were. Rules, they were actually rules. This far surpassed Qin Yu's expectations. In his initial understanding, something like rules was something that could only be sensed and understood. It was a mysterious and mystical existence. After all, when a cultivator stepped into divine soul, they had to open their soul space and strengthen their soul. Only then would they have the qualifications to sense the existence of rules. He never imagined that they could also be seen with the naked eye. He even had an intuition that he could touch the rules with his hand. The little blue lamp wouldn't lie. Then it was clear that what Qin Yu saw now was the true form of the rules. However, this required a cultivator's cultivation to reach an extremely formidable boundary in order to have the qualifications to touch them. The current Qin Yu was far from having the qualifications to do so, but the existence of the little blue lamp allowed him to grasp the strength in this spatial fragment ahead of time. The countless blurry phantoms that flooded the world appeared in front of his eyes. Deep in Qin Yu's heart, he felt his heart race. This racing wasn't fear, but an intense excitement. He felt as if he had overlooked something, and to him, this was something that would play an incomparably important role. What was it? Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows in deep thought. His mind was in chaos. As he furrowed his eyebrows in pain, it was like a bolt of lightning flashed through the fog, directly striking his soul. A feeling of enlightenment filled him as he finally realized what it was. When a cultivator started from energy training and rose all the way to nascent soul, their lifespan would increase and their strength would become formidable. But all of this could be seen as a cultivator tempering themselves. But from the divine soul realm onwards, the soul space would open. This was the same as a cultivator having the qualifications to peep into the world, using the soul to comprehend the rules, merging one's body with heaven and earth, forming a connection and stepping into a new world of cultivation. At this stage, the most important thing for a cultivator was to comprehend the rules, sense them, borrow them, and control them to obtain unparalleled power. As for the rules, they were omnipresent yet untouchable. They were hidden between the heavens and the earth, and could only be comprehended bit by cultivators. The speed was slow, and the requirements were extremely high. It required a cultivator to experience the vicissitudes of time, experience the vicissitudes of life, understand the world, have a tenacious soul, and possess a formidable will. Thus, the threshold for nascent soul to enter divine soul was enough to block 90% of cultivators. As for divine soul taking another step further into blue sea, that was enough to block 99% of cultivators. As for higher realms, the number was so small that it was impossible to calculate with probability. One could only say that one had a heaven-defying talent and also had a monstrous lucky chance. But today, Qin Yu seemed to have discovered a cultivation shortcut. Although he hadn't verified it yet, even if there was only a 10% chance, it was still enough to leave him excited. This shortcut was the spatial fragment he was currently in. This was because it also possessed its own rules, and Qin Yu possessed the strength to control everything within this spatial fragment. No matter how complex or difficult it was to comprehend the rules, once they were clearly presented in front of him, he could control them. If this could really be done, then once Qin Yu stepped into the divine soul realm, his cultivation speed would be completely different from that of other cultivators. Not only would he not slow down, but he would grow at an even more astonishing speed. Of course, the premise was that this spatial fragment could truly condense its own rules and not be like it was now, a blurry and broken phantom. Originally, a pure spatial fragment didn't have a complete heaven and earth, so it was impossible for complete rules to exist. This was also the reason why the vast majority of spatial fragments had restrictions on cultivations, because once a strength surpassed the limit it could withstand entered, it would cause the spatial fragment to collapse. But the existence of the little blue lamp was the greatest variable. It was mysterious, formidable, and even the naked will to destroy the world itself. All of this was further proof that it was extraordinary. Since the little blue lamp had chosen to fuse with space, then it wasn't impossible for this incomplete spatial fragment to give birth to complete rules. Well, this explanation was indeed complicated and tongue-twisting, but it could be summed up in a single sentence. Qin Yu had sufficient confidence in the little blue lamp. This was because it had never disappointed him. Qin Yu took a deep breath and smiled. He was filled with endless confidence towards his future road of cultivation. There would come a day when he would be able to control his own destiny. The second day of perceiving the good fortune tablet came to an end. Unfortunately, A pleasant surprise similar to yesterday's from the Eclipse clan didn't appear. The youths all sighed inwardly. Indeed, the pill recipe for the Revival Good Fortune pill wasn't easy to obtain. Their eyes fell on Zhao Jiutian's back as he walked away with his hands behind his back. Subconsciously, they felt a bit more awe. Respecting the strong was one of the most instinctive principles in the hearts of all cultivators. Luckily, no one had any harvest today. This caused everyone to feel a bit gratified. But this sort of situation wouldn't continue forever. On the 6th day, a young man named Wu Yuan suddenly opened his eyes, a smile on his face. He was originally suppressing himself, not wanting to make too much noise. But the wild joy that surged in his heart caused his smile to turn into a hearty laugh. Countless people's hearts shook. They silently looked over, envy in their eyes. The black door soon opened. Wei Ziqing and Chief Steward Qin walked in with smiles on their faces, sincerely congratulating Wu Yuan. The second person to perceive the pill recipe for the Revival Good Fortune pill appeared. Zhao Jiutian's success on the first day had surpassed everyone's expectations, but it could only be considered an accident. But Wu Yuan's success placed a tremendous pressure on the youths. Under this pressure, they would either sink into oblivion or they would erupt. Thus, on the 8th day, Black Bebe became the third person to perceive the pill recipe. His success caused even more youths to clench their fists and bite their lips. The gas of people that had used their connections to enter had all succeeded, but they were still bitterly struggling. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they had lost face. On the 10th day, there were actually 2 cultivators that succeeded in an hour. South Xiangsfang Zinan, Waterfront's Yu Mingqing. On the 13th day, another person succeeded. On the 27th day, White Fengfeng revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. But in the blink of an eye, her eyes filled with worry as she looked at Qinyu. This was because even today, after nearly a month had passed, the best big brother Baoyu in her heart still hadn't had any harvests. Chapter 346. Wei Ziqing welcomed them with a smile. Then he brought White Fengfeng away. Unlike the little girl who had a worried and reluctant expression, Lord Wei's eyes never lingered on Qinyu. The silent bus was empty. 9 of the original 13 people were left behind in the heavily guarded square building. Starting from 10 days ago, Chief Steward Qin had been keeping an eye on the refining of the Revival Good Fortune pill. Now he was responsible for escorting 2 people. They could be considered familiar faces. They were 2 of the 3 divine souls that had brought them here the first time. However, the attitudes of these 2 divine soul realm martial artists were extremely cold. They sat in the carriage with their eyes closed in meditation. There wasn't even a tiny bit of the attitude they had when they were conversing with Qinyu. No miracle happened the next day. In the blink of an eye, it was the 29th day. Today, the atmosphere on the bus was clearly stifling. Besides Qinyu, the other 3 young cultivators all had pale complexions and their sunken eye sockets were red. It was clear they hadn't slept well last night. The bus stopped outside a square building. The 2 divine soul cultivators didn't move at all. They watched as the 4 people got off the bus and entered. Then one of them suddenly said, "This Ning Qin, his breathing skills are quite good." Another person sneered, "What's the use? If you can't comprehend the Dan formula, you're trash. After tomorrow, you'll naturally go back to where you came from." He shook his head and cursed in a low voice. "The 2 bottles of sour plum juice I gave him were worth a lot of money. But now it seems I've completely misjudged them. This brat really got lucky." The person who spoke first shook his head and didn't say anything. He felt that this junior Ning Qin was too quiet and calm. Could it be that he had something to rely on? After passing through the passageway, Wei Ziqing opened the door expressionlessly. It was his duty to open the door for the first time every day, and he could not hand it over to anyone else, but that was all. After opening the door, Lord Wei turned and left. Today, Zhao Jiutian had reached a critical moment in refining the Revival Good Fortune pill. He naturally didn't want to waste any more time here. The good fortune tablet was still as dazzling as it was in the beginning. Qin sat down and looked at the dark golden lines. He sighed inwardly. There was a time limit to perceiving the good fortune tablet. 1 month was the final time limit. If one couldn't perceive the pill recipe, then staying here for 10 years was useless. Therefore, today could be said to be his last chance, because at this time tomorrow it would be difficult for him to meditate under the immense mental pressure. There was no possibility of comprehension at all. Qin, you naturally didn't feel nervous at all. It was just that after waiting for an entire month, the world-killing tribulation still hadn't arrived. This left him feeling a bit restless, because this definitely didn't mean that the will of the world was being lenient and temporarily letting him go. The only explanation was that it was currently accumulating power for a great move. This was a bit different from what Qin Yu sensed at the start, but he could roughly guess what the reason was. The little blue lamp had fused into that distant spatial fragment and was borrowing the power of nothingness to sever all auras. Perhaps this was the last time that the worlds would easily lock onto him, so it placed even more importance on him. To Qin Yu, this definitely wasn't a good thing, but he couldn't find a solution. His chest surged with irritation, and he couldn't help but sigh. In the dead silence of the grotto, this soft sigh was incomparably clear. Immediately, the other 3 people's efforts to restrain their thoughts were broken, and an inexplicable anger rose in them. Ning Qin, who are you trying to put on such a calm look for today? I don't believe that your heart can be so calm. Zhang Xiaoguan no longer had his usual elegant and gentlemanly demeanor. His hair was messily tied up and he had a sneer on his face. Yan Mingxin, who had a good relationship with him, also had a dark and gloomy expression. I have long since disliked fellow Taoist Ning Qin's nauseating attitude. A failure is a failure, so why force yourself to appear so calm? Could it be that fellow Taoist thinks that the South Shine Nation officials will look at you differently just because you have a good mental fortitude? The last person sneered. Even if I can remain calm, what use is there even if the world collapses and I don't blink? If I can't perceive the pill recipe, then there is no need to mention anything else. Qin Yu frowned. These 3 people definitely didn't have such a rash and aggressive temperament. It was likely that the pressure was too great and their minds were unbalanced, and they had also been affected by the decaying aura of the good fortune tablet. Even so, that didn't mean that he had to endure these 3 people. Moreover, Qin Yu wasn't in a good mood right now. Zhang Xiaoguan's heart was tumbling with emotions. Just as he was about to continue venting, he saw that silent figure look up. The icy coldness in his eyes caused him to stiffen and an instinctive fear to rise in his heart. No matter what he said, he couldn't speak. Luckily, at this time, the black door suddenly opened, saving Zhang Xiaoguan's face. He let out a sigh of relief, but at the same time he was also curious as to what had happened. Zhao Jiutian walked in with his head held high. After 20 days, he was clearly much weaker than before. There were even several strands of white in his black hair. It seemed that he had suffered greatly in refining the revival good fortune pill. But at this time he had a proud and arrogant expression on his face. Every movement he made contained an imposing aura, as if he had an awe-inspiring spirit. Zhang Xiaoguan's heart shook. He wasn't an idiot. He knew what it meant for Zhao Jiutian to return after leaving for over 10 days. He had actually refined the revival good fortune pill. For a time, all of the anger and mockery faded away, leaving behind only a sense of loss and hesitation. Compared to him, the 4 people in the cave today were absolute losers. Zhao Jiutian strode forwards, his eyes looking straight ahead, ignoring everyone else. When he was 30 feet away from the good fortune tablet, a dark golden halo of light appeared. Originally, this light was to prevent anyone from approaching, but as it touched Zhao Jiutian's figure, it scattered and wrapped around him. Like this, there was no longer any chance of a fluke. Several envious sighs sounded out. Qin Yu stared at Zhao Jiutian, not wanting to miss a single moment. He wanted to know just what sort of changes would occur after the Good Fortune tablet obtained the revival Good Fortune pill. Zhao Jiutian took a deep breath. He took out a pitch-black jade bottle from his chest, one that was impossible to see clearly. The Good Fortune tablet erupted with a dark golden light that swept it away. After several breaths of time, the dark golden light appeared once more, covering Zhao Jiutian. This process didn't continue for too long. A gentle strength sent him 30 feet away. Zhao Jiutian's eyes were closed, his body gently shivering. He couldn't suppress the ecstasy on his face. One could easily guess that he had obtained unimaginable benefits from the Good Fortune tablet. A trace of disappointment appeared in his eyes. He had originally hoped to see something, but it was clear that his thoughts were empty. It seemed that he could only wait for himself to make a sacrifice in order to reach a conclusion. Shua! Zhao Jiutian opened his eyes, a divine light sparkling within them. After being covered in the dark golden light for several breaths of time, although there was still a bit of white in his hair, his spirit had been restored. A strange light flashed in Zhao Jiutian's eyes. He turned and locked onto Qin Yu. At the same time, he could see the disappointment on Qin Yu's face. Disappointment? His heart skipped a beat before he sneered. Even today you were still trying to play tricks on me. Ning Qin, oh Ning Qin, what qualifications do you have to express disappointment in me? The corners of his lips curled up in a cold smile. Although it wasn't too strong, it was still domineering to the extreme. Ning Qin, on the second day, I warned you not to fall too far behind. It seems you didn't take me to heart at all. I am truly disappointed. Zhao Jiutian took several steps forwards and arrived in front of Qin Yu. He lowered his voice and said, "In the competition, you ruined my plans and nearly cut off my future prospects. Did you ever expect today's result? If you can't perceive the pill recipe, then you have no value to the Southshine Nation. I guarantee that you will suffer a miserable fate in the future." Looking at the two people whispering to each other, Zhang Xiaoguan's eyes lit up with joy. Today, Zhao Jiutian had come with the momentum of refining the revival Good Fortune pill. Even if Ning Qin had 100 methods at his disposal, he would still be humiliated. Yan Mingxin and Qin Yu also sneered. As expected, Qin Yu took a step back. He lowered his head. He must have been filled with grief and indignation, but he had no choice but to retreat. The three people were waiting for something even more wonderful to occur. But what happened next caused their sneers to freeze on their faces. Their eyes widened and they froze in place, their bodies turning cold. Pa! The syllable was simple and could be emitted from many places. But the most classic was naturally the unprotected intimate contact between the face and the 5 fingers. Qin Yu slowly drew back his hand. His expression was calm and his voice light. What I dislike the most in my life is being threatened in front of my face, so I usually strike back. If I offended you in any way, I apologize, but if there is a next time, I will still strike you. Zhao Jiutian's face rapidly swelled up and 5 clear finger marks appeared. His body shivered in anger before he suddenly calmed down. His eyes were filled with hatred. Good, very good. Since you want to seek death, how can I not help you? After being knocked to the ground, Zhao Jiutian calmly stood up. He brushed away the non-existent dust on his body and cupped his hands together towards the black stone door. Lord Wei, Chief Steward Qin, I ask that you too uphold justice for Jiutian. No one thought that after being slapped to the ground, Zhao Jiutian wouldn't stand up to fight back, but instead choose to complain. Zhang Xiaoguan was stunned for a moment before he secretly admired Qin Yu. A true man could bow and submit when necessary. Although this was easy to say, there were very few people who could actually do this. Zhao Jiutian's actions seemed a bit weak, but it was actually the best choice he could make. With the smallest price, he could borrow the hands of the officials to destroy Qin Yu. Today he had used the revival good fortune pill to complete the sacrifice. This was the moment when the South Shine Nation officials placed the most importance on him. Ning Qin's slap had indeed vented his anger, but it had also forced him into a hopeless situation. Humph, humph, you were pretending to be calm just now, so why are you acting so impulsive now? Let's see just how you deal with this. Wei Ziqing and Qin Wushang walked out from the door together, their complexions gloomy. Originally, the South Shine Nation officials had placed a great deal of attention on Ning Qin because of his amazing performance in the competition. But reality proved that the results of the competition didn't represent anything at all. After meditating on the pill recipe on the first day and completing the refinement in a month, Zhao Jiutian even had the possibility of refining a second revival good fortune pill. They were preparing to wantonly win him over, but Ning Qin had actually slapped him in the face. Then they had to satisfy Zhao Jiutian before they could persuade him to continue refining pills. As for Ning Qin, since he was useless, there was no need to consider him any further. Wei Ziqing and Qin Wushang didn't speak, but from their gloomy complexions, one could roughly guess what they were thinking. Zhao Jiutian's lips curved up in a cold smile. If someone dared to slap him, then they had to be prepared for eternal damnation. Ning Qin, no one can save you this time. Chief Steward Qin was expressionless. His eyes were slightly lowered. With his status, it wasn't convenient for him to act at this time. Wei Ziqing coldly said, Ning Qin, you dare to attack someone in front of the good fortune tablet? You are far too arrogant. Do you even have the slightest bit of awe towards my South Shine Nation's holy object? Men, seize Ning Qin and lock him up in the dungeon. Hold on. Qin Yu paused for a moment. Then he smiled. After this junior slapped you just now, my mind was refreshed, and I seem to have perceived the pill recipe.